Good morning to you. It's 6 o'clock on Friday, the 25th of August. Today, Donald Trump's mugshot dominating the news, the first ever taken of a former president after he was charged with trying to overturn the election results in 2020.
Our energy prices might actually drop this winter as Ofgem announced the new energy price cap.
We'll have all the latest showbiz news, including more legal troubles for Lizzo.
And, of course, the latest weather for you with Alex.
A cool start out there today with some sunshine. We are going to see a few showers developing, and then we're into the weekend. A bank holiday for many of us. I'll have a full forecast coming up later.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ann Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News. Well, it's nice to have you back.
Thank you very much indeed. Back where I should be, back where I belong.
Absolutely.
Should we have a couple of pictures?
I've got a lovely picture here. I want to say congratulations to Olivia, the Dulux dog. She is apparently the present Dulux dog. There she is. I have to say, she looks a bit rougher there than usually, doesn't she? But she's just had a litter of 7.
Well, you're going to look a bit rough, aren't you?
Yeah, well, exactly. There you are.
Very good. And
it's International Dog Day tomorrow.
Oh, is it?
So, yeah, we've got to get her into the studio with her pups. Nice. Be, wouldn't it?
What sort of breed is the Dulux?
Old English sheepdog.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, and apparently they are endangered. They're on the Kennel Club's at-risk list.
Well, she's helping.
Well, she's helping. That. She really is doing her bit. Yeah.
The little ones look very, very cute.
So well done, Olivia.
If that looks cute, how do you fancy this?
Oh, yeah.
Look at that. It's apparently the UK's most haunted picture, and it's been bought twice from this shop, only for about 20 quid. It's only a little thing.
I think it turned up. It wasn't a charity shop.
Yeah. And they've returned, everyone who buys it returns it without wanting a refund because it's giving them the heebie-jeebies.
And I can see why. I mean, it's a lovely portrait of a little girl, but there's something spooky about it.
I don't know.
Oh, there is.
So anyway,
if that were hanging up in your house, you'd worry that those eyes were going to follow you around the room.
Well, it is the eyes, apparently. It's the eyes that are doing it. But people are bringing it back shaking and...
It's because it looks sort of ghostly, doesn't it?
The second buyer was shaky and distressed.
So are they suggesting that the painting itself is haunted?
It's haunted, yeah.
Yee.
So it's now on sale saying, are you brave enough to buy it for 20 quid?
No.
I'd have it.
No, you wouldn't.
I would.
No, you wouldn't.
I would.
You wouldn't want to hang that in your house at all.
Just for the hell of it, yeah.
Well, just because you'd take a dare. That's what it is.
It's a dare. So, anyway, if you've got a haunted picture...
Yeah, let us know.
It's weird, though, isn't it?
Tell you what, picture I wouldn't have hanging in my house, and that's the new mugshot that's just been taken over the pond.
Yes, of former US President Donald Trump. I mean, it's quite a picture as he voluntarily surrendered at Fulton County Jail in Atlanta.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because mugshots usually... people look pretty rough and a bit shocked. And they always have, don't they have those height charts behind them and everything? I mean, that is a very well manicured mugshot. He's got that sort of you're fired look on his face.
He does look absolutely furious.
Yeah.
And he's not holding his head up properly. But then who's going to argue with him?
No, I mean, he's staring down, daring you, isn't he, in that shot? But it's interesting because he faces 13 felony counts in the state of Georgia alone regarding efforts to overturn the state's 2020 presidential election result.
Well, of course, never one to back down. He came out fighting, telling reporters he has every right to challenge an election that he felt was unfair.
Thank you very much for being here. I really believe this is a very sad day for America. This should never happen. If you challenge an election, you should be able to challenge an election. I thought the election was a rigged election, a stolen election, and I should have every right to do that. As you know, you have many people that you've been watching over the years do the same. What has taken place here is a travesty of justice. We did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong, and everybody knows it. I've never had such support, and that goes with the other ones, too. What they're doing is election interference. They're trying to interfere with an election. There's never been anything like it in our country before. This is their way of campaigning. And this is one instance, but you have three other instances. It's election interference. We did nothing wrong at all, and we have every right, every single right, to challenge an election that we think is dishonest, that we think it's very dishonest.
Well, let's speak to political analyst Ronald Granieri. A very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. I mean, that mugshot is just a head and shoulders photograph, and yet it is historically pretty important, isn't it?
It certainly is. It's the only one we've ever had of a president of the United States, a former president. It is definitely a historic day, I guess, if you wanted to put it in the most value neutral terms you want to put it. It's a big deal. And it's a big deal, especially that the president is being charged, or the former president is being charged in a state court, not in a federal court.
What are we to make of the rhetoric that he comes out with? Because he's following his old pattern, isn't he, of coming out and saying, well, you know, I've done absolutely nothing wrong and everybody knows it. It's as though if he chants out the line that everyone believes him, it becomes true.
And that is his pattern, right? It's either everyone knows it, or in other circumstances he'll come out with the, you know, people are saying, which then he presents as truth, because that way he doesn't have to say that I'm merely claiming this, but rather that it is somehow objective. Now, we can't be surprised that he says he's innocent, right? People always say they're innocent when they've been booked, and we don't, you know, people are innocent until they're proven guilty in this country as well. But it's important to note that, you know, you can say whatever you want about an election. What you can't do, what you shouldn't do, is defame people without evidence, which is one of the things he's accused of doing. What you're not supposed to do is you're not supposed to encourage government officials, in the absence of evidence, to look for or find 11,680 votes. Those are the things that it's precisely this idea that there is a line between saying, I really think I won this election, and me claiming that person in particular stole it, when there's no evidence that you can present that person did anything of the sort.
But this rhetoric, and he said it quite a few times, didn't he? I have the right, of course I have, to challenge the outcome of an election. And would that point towards that's basically going to be his defence?
It looks that way. It looks like that's one of the big defenses, is essentially, to use American terminology, is a First Amendment defense, is freedom of speech, freedom to petition the government to redress grievances, if that I'm free to do that, that anyone is free to do that. And so the big question is going to be, as a legal matter, and as a matter of when they work out the facts in court, is whether Mr. Trump and his co-defendants here, the alleged co-conspirators, whether they crossed the line from merely expressing an opinion to actually trying to spread falsehoods that they were aware were false, or that they were encouraging government officials to do things that they knew were false and contrary to fact.
What astounds me with this, and what I can't quite get my head around, Ronald, is the idea that whatever is going on here, it seems to be boosting his popularity politically, which means whatever the timings and whether or not there's a conviction, he could still be the nominee for the Republican Party, and in fact, it looks like could still become president even if he's sitting in a jail cell.
It is astonishing, and he's of course aware of this, right? So he realizes that, you know, making sure that he was wearing his typical presidential suit, making sure that he could get the photograph that he wanted taken of himself. These are important decisions, because he could read a poll just as well as anybody else, and it is fascinating. And I don't know, the old joke, right? I'm a trained historian, and the joke is, if you ask me what's going to happen tomorrow, I probably couldn't tell you, but if you ask me in 10 years, I can explain why whatever's going to happen tomorrow was probably inevitable. But in this case, I can't really say that, in the sense that this is, we are in completely uncharted territory. And the idea that his opponents are afraid to criticize him is even more astonishing.
Yes, we actually heard some of the Republican contenders saying that they wanted to be president, but they wouldn't mind Trump as their vice president or as their advisor.
Where's their advisor? Well, and at least one Republican, one challenger for the Republican nomination, Vivek Ramaswamy, has made it a point of saying that he promises on day one as president he would pardon Donald Trump anyway, which is, I mean, this level of support for the people who are actually trying to take your job away from you or defeat you for a job is unusual, to say the least, I guess.
I mean, what does that tell us about the GOP and how they're operating at the moment if people who actually want the job don't even have the nerve to properly criticise the man who they want to replace? Right.
I say it at the most basic level, it just reminds us all that the Republican Party is the party of Donald Trump. That even no matter what size his base may be, within the larger country, within the party itself, his base is so large that, and at least is perceived as so large and so united, that there is no one who has the nerve to directly criticize it. I mean, one can imagine that a lot of these people are crossing their fingers and hoping that something will happen that will encourage Mr. Trump to step away. But they don't seem to want to go at him because they assume that the voters support him. And until we actually see the voters vote, say in the Iowa caucuses in February or in March in New Hampshire, that is the assumption everybody's going to be operating on. He still is well ahead of everyone else.
And once again, he's using the power of social media and turning his back on the established media. The Republican contenders all go on television in a big debate. He wasn't there. It was still all about Trump. Meanwhile, he does an interview on X, I think we call it now, rather than Twitter, and he gets a viewership of something like 200 million.
Yeah. Now, it is, especially when you consider that the Republican debate was on a media channel that has always been very sympathetic to Donald Trump. And one could argue that he and Rupert Murdoch worked closely together in order to make Donald Trump president. And yet Trump can even turn up his nose at Fox News is quite notable. And the one big news, though, was that he did tweet, or actually I don't know what we call it anymore. He X'd on X this morning of his own mugshot, which is he has returned then to the platform that he's been off of for the past couple of years. And so that raises interesting questions of whether he's planning on going back towards X now that X is run by the more sympathetic Elon Musk, and what this means for his former or his existing social media platform, Truth Social. We're going to see a lot more things that we're going to say are unprecedented, I imagine, in the weeks and months to come.
I know it's the middle of the night in Philadelphia, but you still look exasperated as well as tired on this one. It's a head scratcher. Good to see you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to speak to both of you.
Thank you. Yes, it is a head scratcher, isn't it? What do you think? Let us know. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Now, to something which should make you smile anyway, the energy regulator Ofgem. Not our favourite people over the last couple of years, but anyway, they're announcing the next price cap. This is going to cover October to December, a little later on today, and prices are expected to drop.
Now, analysts are saying that a typical annual bill could be £150, that's an annual bill, remember, could be £150 cheaper than now and nearly £600 down from last year. But with reduced help from the government and higher fixed costs for many, will we actually see much difference in what we pay this winter?
Let's talk to energy expert and power market policy analyst, Malcolm Grimson. Good to see you this morning, Malcolm. What are we to make of this?
Well, the global energy prices have come down very significantly over the course of the period since the absolute peak after the Ukraine invasion. The world, as always happens with high prices, the world has accommodated that. We've seen new sources of fossil fuel becoming available. We've seen new energy sources continuing to be invested in, nuclear and renewables. And rightly, when global prices come down, then we see a benefit here. These prices are still historically very high, and whether we'll see them coming back to the same levels we were getting 2 or 3 years ago, I think is questionable. But compared to the crisis we were in a year ago, things do look a bit brighter at the moment.
Yeah, can we just get that maths right again, because it didn't make much sense as I was sort of reading it out. We could get £150. We could end up with bills that are £150 less than now, and £500 less than last year. How does that work?
It's all really to do with the fact that last year we got a £400 rebate or grant or whatever you want to call it from the government, alongside a price guarantee, which was separate from the price cap. This time last year, the price cap was quite high, but pretty much irrelevant to almost everybody because of these extra benefits we were getting. Now, we're not getting that these years. Now, if you've got a fairly big house, you're fairly well off. Let's say your bill was, take a figure, £4,000 last year, and it's come down a quarter. Well, you actually paid £3,600 last year because of the £400 rebate we were getting. So you actually saved £600 over the last year. If you only had a bill of £1,000 last year, well, you only paid £600 because of this £400 bonus. But your bill has only come down by a quarter, which is to £750. So you're actually paying more than last year. And this is why, because of all of these government, they were a good idea. They helped us through the crisis. But they do make the picture enormously complicated when trying to work out the effects on each individual household.
Yeah, that does muddy the waters a little bit. But where does it leave us moving forward? Are we likely to see at least a stabilisation, if not a continued drop? I mean, because one thing that, when it comes to these oil prices, the one thing that I've noticed lately is that the price of petrol started to climb back up 10 pence a litre or whatever. Well, that's obviously indicative of what we're doing with all our fuel as well, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, petrol prices have come down very significantly, but they've edged up from sort of, I don't know, 145 to 150 around where I am at the moment, maybe a bit more than 150 in the best places at present. We should bear in mind that the actual price of oil is not the only thing going on with our petrol pump prices. There is fuel duty and there is VAT. And so, although the oil price increased massively, we saw the petrol increases being rather less than that. And simply, when the oil price comes down, we don't see a proportional reduction in fuel prices because, I say, VAT, fuel duty, and of course the whole chain that needs to deliver the petrol to our cars, which is not affected by the oil price itself. It's fairly much fixed price, and the inflation has been affecting that like everything else. So as I say, it's very difficult often to draw a direct straight line between what's going on in the wholesale markets and a similar increase or decrease in what we as individuals pay for our energy services. And that's not just direct energy services, it's also moving food around, it's moving people around, it's all of the other things that we use energy for.
Well, we'll leave it there for the moment and just cross fingers for a mild winter. Thanks very much indeed, Malcolm Grimston. I tell you what, I mean, never mind thinking about how much you're going to have to put the heating on this coming winter, but I almost put it on this week.
Did you?
It was blinking cold in the mornings. It did cheer up in the afternoon. But, this is August and it's not feeling like August at all.
No, you see, I wouldn't put it on, but that's because it is cold at times, but then at night it seems to be getting really sticky.
Yes, I quite agree. Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
So we had the windows open all last night and the last few nights because it was really sticky in the house.
Quite, absolutely. I'm glad you agree. It wasn't just me. But in the morning, when you get up, it felt cold in the house. And I put my bed socks on to wander around the house. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad it's not just me.
When I have to put my bed socks on, that's
maybe
it.
I did wonder if I was having the menopause.
Really?
Rather than just the weather being off. You never know, do you?
No, absolutely not.
Anyway, I seem to have escaped that one for the time being. Excellent news. Maybe let's see what the weather's going to do for you today, should we? Here's Alex.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Good morning. A case of dodging the downpours today and tomorrow. The long weekends will stay on the cool side, but it should get a little drier as the weekend goes on. Many of us starting a little chilly out there this morning, but with some decent spells of sunshine. Clouds going to bubble up pretty rapidly through the morning, and then we'll see a scattering of showers developing. I suspect parts of eastern England will stay dry, and the showers fairly well scattered elsewhere, so some sunshine coming through. The main exception to that will be northern Scotland, where it stays wet and fairly windy as well. Always on the cool side, a fresher feel compared to yesterday across East Anglia and the southeast. Temperatures high teens at best for many. Still a few heavy showers around this evening, creating a bit of spray and surface water on the roads, staying fairly wet overnight across western Scotland, and fairly windy here as well. And that'll lead into another showery day tomorrow. Again, temperatures dipping down into single figures in rural spots, most towns and cities staying in double figures tonight. On to the weekend then, a bank holiday for many of us, of course. There will be some sunshine around on Saturday, but there will also be a lot of showers tomorrow. Some heavy ones likely over northern England, parts of Wales, but developing more widely again through the day. So you'll be lucky to stay completely dry tomorrow. The showers, where they do occur, could be pretty heavy and even thundery. And again, on the cool side for the time of year, temperatures high teens at best, but it should get a bit drier as we go through the weekend.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Plenty of you backing the president this morning.
Yeah, Knight says the look on people's face would be angry in a mugshot if they were being accused of something they hadn't done. Yeah, I can understand that. We're talking about the mugshot that's been released overnight of President Trump. He looks very angry in it. He looks very determined. He also looks extremely well made up, I think.
Well, mind you, I don't think he's ever without that special shade of orange.
Well, that's true. But do you know what I mean? I've never seen a mugshot like that before. Usually people look very unkempt, a bit shocked, badly lit, and with those sort, the height graph in the background and things like that. That could be just a portrait of him saying, "You're fired."
Yes, possibly. Julie says, if I was American, I would vote Trump. He was a great president. Trump is popular. Stop criticising him.
He's certainly popular.
He is popular. I'll tell you what I would say to that, though, Julie, is it doesn't matter how popular anybody is or how much you agree with them, you should never shy away from criticism.
True.
You should be able to criticise anyone, because there will always be people who disagree with your position. You've got to welcome I think you need to welcome criticism and then rebut it if you can. Or, if you can't, well, you can't.
Well, he did, didn't he? So, guess who is telling the workforce to not work from home and to come in, because it's good for you to come in and interact with each other rather than stay at home and work remotely? Guess who's saying that?
I don't know.
The CEO of Zoom.
Oh, that's a bit of a Gerald Ratner
Well, it
moment.
is a bit, isn't it? Zoom calls can stifle creativity, says a Zoom boss.
Yeah, I think...
I don't think he's quite said it like that.
No, but I tell you what, that put himself out of business. Anyway, we'll look at... That's in the papers
It's a good one, isn't it?
It's a
Yeah.
good one. We'll talk through
If it's
those
true.
a little bit later on. Also coming up, is it ever good to really just stay together for the sake of the kids? We'll be finding out from a married couple who disagree on this one. This is Breakfast on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel,
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
6:25. Good morning to you, watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Now, if you've been married at least once in your lifetime, then you know that sharing your life with someone comes with ups and downs, to say the least. And you can even feel disconnected at some stages from them.
Well, with the divorce rate increasing every year, couples aged 50 and above seem to be more keen to untie their knots as soon as the children leave the nest. So we're asking today, if you're unhappy, is it really better to wait until the kids have left home before you separate?
Well, joining us this morning, Matthew Albiges, who's a relationship expert at Aligned with Love. And Matthew thinks stability gives a good foundation for growth.
Yes, and also his wife, Rebecca Perea, who thinks couples shouldn't stay together if the relationship is unhealthy.
So this is very interesting in that you're married, you're relationship experts, but actually on this one you feel differently. So who do we speak to first? Let's come to you, Rebecca. You think you should, if you really are that unhappy, you should split, no matter what time.
Exactly. First of all, when couples come to us saying that they want to save their relationship for the sake of the children, that's very honorable to think of the well-being of your children. However, if the couple is not in a loving space with each other, it's never a good solution. I don't recommend it at all, because the children are absorbing and modeling the parents' attitude, how they're feeling, their body language, how they speak, the tonality of voice, how they look at each other. They're observing all the time their parents, they're modeling them, either consciously, unconsciously. I don't think it's a good idea at all if the couple is not in a loving space with each other.
So, Matthew, if Rebecca thinks that, why do you think it's as well to fight on through, to battle on through, to keep going until the kids are old enough?
Absolutely, Stephen. I think for so many couples, a big part of their vision, their dream for the relationship, why they're together, their purpose for making a life together is to have a family and to have children and to support their children. So if the relationship's not working, it can, be such a great opportunity to work on the relationship, to make it a positive, loving, respectful, supportive place, so that they can support the children effectively. And I think that's a really valid and worthwhile dream for so many couples and families.
But Matthew, isn't there plenty of evidence that if you stay together for the sake of the children until they're older, and then you split, that can be just as upsetting for older children?
It can, and actually even more damaging. In fact, the statistics say that staying together in a failing relationship is the worst of all outcomes. Yeah. So where things are not working, what I'm talking about is a situation where couples are really committed to modeling and demonstrating the best kind of relationship for their kids. Because I absolutely agree, Anne, that if it's not working, that really is the worst, not only for the individuals involved, but for the children as well.
So is there a sense with this, Rebecca, that actually it's worth at least trying, even if you're using the children almost as an excuse to stay together? If there's anything which you can salvage from the relationship, it's a good excuse to use to try and keep on going.
That's a very good question, Stephen, because the children, our children, can be sometimes the catalyst of our relationship, because they can be the cause, the reason for us to stay together when we would actually give up because we're tired of being tired. We're tired of feeling resentful. We're tired of talking for nothing, just feeling like we're talking to a brick wall, So because of the children, we can save our relationship relationship and then be very happy. But also sometimes if it can feel like our children are actually a nightmare, and that's the only reason why we keep up the show running, when actually it depends on how you want to look at it. So that our children can be a lovely blessing that could save us sometimes.
Matthew, according to the evidence as well, there's a growing divorce rate amongst the over 50s who, it is suggested, are doing just what you're saying. They're staying together for as long as they possibly can until the children are old enough to be able to handle it, I guess. And then they are taking the decision to split up. You wonder why. If they've been able to stick together for that long, couldn't they try and make it through into later life too?
It's a great question, Angela. I'm just going to say that, the fact that people stay together, sometimes we look at the divorce statistics and say, well, wow, a lot of people are getting divorced. But what that really hides, and I think is an even more interesting point, which is that how many of the ones that remain together are really happy? Because you might think, well, they're together, so that's success. But when you actually look at what's happening in the relationship and how it's affecting them individually, their state of mind, their mental health, their children, you say, well, is it really a success anyway? So, really the question of whether they stay together, it's more a question, well, are they happy? Is the relationship working? And, are they learning the lessons that the relationship is giving them?
Do you think, Rebecca, that people marry for the right reasons? I mean, if you get married because you feel you're of an age when you should be, or if you get married because you feel like you should be having children at this stage, I mean, you can't expect it to be all roses and happiness for the rest of your days, can you?
That's a very good question, Stephen. Exactly. Do people marry for the right reasons? Most of the time, I would say no. Not everyone marries for the right reasons, because sometimes we want to feel happy. So we think when we have a child, when we have a partner, when I buy a house, when I get that job, I will be happy. But the reality is, if we are not feeling happy right now with where we are at and what we have, we're never going to be happy. The happiness comes from within and is projected out into what we call reality, into what we create. It could be our children. But if we're not happy, we're not going to be happy just because we're going to have a child, just because we're going to get married, because we're not a match for happiness if we're not happy right now.
Are you two happy?
We're in a pretty good place most of the time. We have our moments, we are working together, living together, having our family. It's not without its challenges, but I think we're in a pretty good place. We like to try and lead by example as much as possible. We keep our arguments off screen, let's say.
Glad to hear it. Well, we'll say thank you very much and goodbye, and you can go and have a row about it in the kitchen now.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, let's have a healthy discussion. Thanks very much, both.
Lovely to meet you. Thank you.
I do think a lot of people get married for the wrong reasons.
What do you think is the wrong reason?
Well, only from experience that I've known a lot of, particularly sort of younger women who've had various sort of relationships, it's serial monogamy they call it, don't they? And then they reach an age where suddenly they're married and they're having a child. And I think they've sort of said, well, I've got to have... If I don't settle down now and have a child...
Well, that's it, because women do have that thing of the sort of ticking time bomb. They're going to lose their chance of having children. That's often a huge reason to get married, isn't it? But then we were talking about this last weekend as well. A lot of men want children and are desperately looking for a marriage or a partnership so that they can have children. People are people, aren't they?
Well,
but I've known people who stick together through thick and thin for the sake of the children, and then as soon as the children sort of went off to university, they got divorced, and it was devastating for their children. And I think any idea that you're maybe saving your children from pain earlier on, it's just as painful apparently for older children later on, because they thought that that they're leaving home. And suddenly, the home they're leaving is fracturing. Yeah, and I think whether you do it to stick together for as long as possible, if you can. Of course, it depends on how horrible it is at home, doesn't it?
Yeah. If it's not a happy place, you've got to have I do believe you've got to have a happy, comfortable place to go home to. Otherwise, you do wonder what the point is. But anyway, let us know what you think. I'm sat here twiddling my wedding ring.
Yeah, you are, aren't you? Yes, I know. I'm sure there are lots of people watching at the moment who've got experience of either one or the other, have absolutely stuck together for the sake of the children, and often found later on the children won't thank you for it because they'd rather just have a bit of honesty at the time. On the other hand, it just entirely depends what sort of people you are, I guess.
I guess it does.
And when you get to the age of 50 plus, and you have done that, you've stuck together for the sake of the children, and then you go your separate ways, I would have thought that could be quite lonely and also very expensive.
I can't imagine, though, how people start again in their 50s or 60s or 70s if they get divorced at that sort of age. How do you start again? Or is it just a relief to be single?
That too.
I don't know.
And people go a bit bonkers as well sometimes, don't they? They go, hey, you know, and go off and, you know, relive their misspent youth or something. I don't know. I know people who've done all sorts of that. Oh, yes. When you get to my old age, you know them all.
We need to have a discussion.
Do get in touch if you've got any experience of like that. If you stuck together for the sake of the kids, whether it worked out well. And what it's like to be divorced later on and have to plough your own furrow again.
Yeah.
Quite scary.
Work, anyway, gbviews@gbnews.com. We've got all the stories making the newspapers heading away very shortly. But this is GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is what I love about GB News. It's weird and wonderful. Fred says, morning Fred, says, I live a few miles outside Blackpool and it's very pleasant outside. I just went to see my hens.
Oh, how
morning
lovely.
to you, Fred.
They've laid for you.
And then straight after that, we have Rosemary, who says, I'm listening to GB News in Mexico.
Wow.
What a mix. Couldn't make
Brilliant
it up,
mix,
could
yeah.
you?
No, thank you very much.
It's early in Mexico, early hours of the morning.
And we've got a lot of Donald Trump fans watching at the moment, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
Utter disgrace what they're doing to Trump. America is a laughingstock, says Karen.
Ian says Trump has the biggest ego of anyone. However, he was good for world peace, good for the USA economy, and most importantly, he was pro-UK.
That's true. The present administration doesn't feel very pro-UK, does it?
It doesn't. No, it doesn't. That's about world peace. Though, I mean, I have to say at the time, I did salute him for what he did with North Korea and going to meet him. I think that was a no one but Trump could have done that. However, we did spend the previous 2 years thinking he was going to start sending bombs over there.
Yeah.
with the whole Rocket Man and all that sort of thing that he did. It was very, very tenuous for a while.
And I think you can always argue as well that it's actually very good for a country, especially one as important as America, to have a president with a big ego. Well, yeah. And I actually thought that's why Boris was quite good as Prime Minister. I know there were lots of other arguments against him, but you're known by your president, aren't you? He's the guy who's going all over the world, being an ambassador or whatever, and people knew Trump.
Well, they did know him.
And Joe Biden goes everywhere and falls down the stairs.
Well, he's just a bit old, isn't he? But then I would make that argument against Trump, really. I think it's two old men.
Yeah, it would be nice.
Time for a bit of younger
blood. Absolutely. OK. Let's get on with the newspapers.
Should we? Yes. Let's have a look at the front page of the Times this morning. Prigozhin made serious mistakes, says Putin, as the Russian president breaks his silence after the mercenaries' jet was bombed out of the sky.
The Telegraph is also leading with today's biggest story. He was a talented businessman who made mistakes, Putin says about his former confidant.
The Star has The Curse of the Spooky Child, that painting that keeps being sent back to the shop because it's too creepy.
And the Mirror lead with the tragic Sari Sharif mystery. The Pakistan police now are apparently closing in on her dad.
And the Express says $4 billion spent on asylum is unacceptable. The words of the Prime Minister.
So let's go through the papers now. Joining us this morning is author and journalist Suzanne Holder, and alongside co-founder of the Together Association, Alan Miller. And a very good morning to you both.
Morning.
Morning.
So we're going to start with you, Suze. I keep asking you whether you're Suzanne, Susan, or Suze.
We went with Suze, didn't we, last time?
Yeah, exactly. This is from the Daily Express. This amazing amount of money spent on asylum.
Yes. So Rishi Sunak has insisted, according to the Daily Express, that the best way of slashing the unacceptable £4 billion a year asylum bill is to stop the boats in the first place, which might kind of seem obvious. But he's now kind of got on board with that idea, which I think is good news. He's given us a bit of detail, not much, but a bit of detail on how he would propose to do that, which is to break the business model, step up the joint working with France. Obviously, we already have given France an awful lot of money, but we've signed a £480 million deal with Paris to boost patrols on French beaches and increase the number of drones scanning for would-be migrants hiding in the dunes. But if Rishi Sunak actually just buys the Daily Express today and looks at their investigation that they've done, it might give him a bit more information about how he could go about stopping the boats, because they've done a very interesting and alarming undercover operation where basically they typed the words dinghy, journey and England in Albanian into the internet and managed to find lots of smugglers, a lot of which are based in UK, using UK mobiles, and got lots of details that way. Also found, and this is just unbelievable, I think, how the smugglers are touting for business on TikTok. Using kind of funky videos with a bit of music and sales pitches. It comes today, it leaves today, the best prices and only 2 hours away. So I think if you want to go looking for the business model and how it's operating, maybe that's how you do it.
Doesn't sound that difficult, does it?
Doesn't sound, well, it's not that difficult to find them. Stopping them, I understand, would be very much.
I wonder, you know, they've interviewed various places, newspapers and everything have interviewed some of these illegal migrants who've been stopped and whatever, sent back, I presume, at some point. And they say we're going to do it again and again and again and again. We'll do it until we're successful. You wonder how they're getting the money.
Absolutely.
Because they're paying. I mean, these people smugglers are demanding money from them. Yeah. How come they've got the money to keep doing it?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I mean, I think there are different stories for different people, and it's a very lucrative and dangerous situation. I do think one thing about this story, and it is quite comprehensive what they've done in the Express, is that it's still the case that we have to address why the Home Office has taken over 6 months to process this. Over 140,000 people are waiting over 6 months. So on the one hand, there is this immediate question of the boats, but there is a question about the public sector. There's a question about how things are done efficiently, why it is that, like in other areas in the public arena, and also the private sector as it happens in Britain, we seem to be sclerotic and sluggish. Why is it that in the last few years this has happened and we can't efficiently execute this in a way that deals with the credible ones that should have asylum?
It requires us to be much more brutal. That's the bottom line, isn't it? Because when you've got people coming over and they haven't got a mobile phone with any contact details, they haven't got a passport, whether they just had to escape without one or threw it into the channel, and they're refusing to say who they are and where they've come from, what do you do?
Well, I think at one level it's absolutely about a commitment to protect the borders and be clear about that, and that does mean when you have a commitment, you have clarity and you deal with things in a certain way. But it just strikes me that there is this issue that's across the board, and whilst the Prime Minister's saying it's not really about processing, it's about handling it, you know, you could have that conversation about stopping. It's a lot of coastal areas. This is not a reason to not address it and deal with it properly. But frankly, I think it's a combination and it's an all-round strategy and approach. And I think that's where it's really not had the kind of commitment. And it's easy to say things, it's easy to do spin, but I do think that it's often about commitment, and that's something that's sort of lacking on the ground.
OK, well, I'm going to have to show some commitment if you want to win the next election. Let's have a look at Putin and Prigozhin, who's been making some comments.
Elsewhere. I mean, people might not be surprised at this story, but the lead of the Telegraph says he was a talented businessman who made mistakes. From Mr. Putin. It's quite a chilling statement. I think it's a bit like a Bond movie that you kind of get this idea. Although often with these things, one never quite knows what's actually been going on. You know, one of the big questions is that's posed by the Telegraph and the Times and others is, does this make Putin more emboldened and stronger? But I think there's a really big problem here, which is that when you have warlordism, when you don't have a commitment necessarily with your own conscripts, but you have to outsource that, and we should take note of that ourselves as well when we're doing it all the time with Blackthorn and others. But when you have to outsource, that does not show great commitment from people, particularly when they've tried to do something and they may have stopped. Now you've got a situation where you have this kind of warlordism. It might actually make his regime even more destabilised and more dangerous and violent. Now, that could be even more problematic, not just for people in that region, but for all of us as well. I suppose the other question that has to come up now is also, is this going to be an endless war? What are the goals? Is it going to be a resolution? What is the role of the West playing within all of this? Because it seems like this is kind of a continuous, endless situation, which is very barbaric and brutal. And the more, as we've seen over the last 20 years, a region becomes destabilised, the more consequences, like the last story, which is one of the reasons there's so many migrants coming because of Northern Africa and other parts of the Middle East, that has consequences internationally, globally. And I really think this is another area where there has to be serious commitment to try and improving and resolving this situation all round and not just having an endless war.
Do you think he ordered the plane to be brought down?
Well, I mean, it's reported that a bomb went off in the plane, and it sounds like the sorts of things that have happened before when people have been targeted. So it absolutely sounds like that. But I would just say this as well. You know, in the fog of war, so many things happen, right, that one never quite entirely knows, but it looks like it's retribution.
I didn't realise as well that actually also on the plane, allegedly, were Prigozhin's second-in-command, his logistics chief and 6 of his lieutenants.
Yeah, so why were they all on the same plane?
That's a kind of the foolish thing to do, isn't it? And the other line I thought that was also interesting, which speaks very much to what you just said, is ageing dictators do 2 things: die or lash out because they realise their power is fading, which is kind of where we are.
Dangerous situation, isn't it?
We're almost out of time, Susan. Let's have a look at the mail, should we? I want to talk about Zoom.
You want to talk about Zoom? Right, okie doke. Yeah, so it's been said that this might be the kind of... Do you remember the Gerald Ratner thing, where Gerald Ratner used a word about his products in his jewellery shop that was not particularly flattering and it caused a major problem? Well, the boss of Zoom, Eric Wan, has been described as scoring a bit of an own goal by saying that Zoom is not the best way to conduct your business. He is the boss of Zoom. But I think full marks for honesty for him, really, if that's what he thinks. He's saying basically that people on meetings, as we all know, if ever we've had any sort of Zoom meeting or discussion, it's tricky. You don't know when to speak. You can't always hear people because if you speak at the same time, you cut people off. He says people are more polite on Zoom. Is that a bad thing?
Not a bad thing.
Maybe not a bad thing, but maybe if you don't get your point across or you don't feel you can say what you want to say, then it's a bit ineffective.
Yeah, I mean, it is efficient, but it's not very friendly, is it?
What on earth would we have done without it?
Oh, absolutely.
Or FaceTime. I mean, more importantly than Zoom meetings, actually.
People are always polite. You have no authority here.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Exactly. Yes, I do. Yes, Handforth. That's near where, that's in Cheshire, near where I live. Yes. All sorts of things to go. But also that Zoom meeting, you have no authority. The lighting, everyone just looked so spooky and kind of ghost-like. It was just quite frightening, wasn't it? But yeah, so I think anything that drives people back into work, I mean, speaking to what we were talking about before, is one of the reasons we're not covering all the backlog of all the things, is because a lot of people are working from home in government departments. It might be if they get back in the office, don't try and do things on Zoom, don't try and do things remotely on their phones, maybe we'll get a lot more achieved and actually bring life back to the cities.
Maybe so. We've got to leave it there. Susan, Alan, thank you both very much indeed. Mind you, I'd rather use Zoom than Teams. I have to do a lot on Teams.
Yes, I do. What's the difference, really?
I find it really odd logging in and doing things on Teams. It's just a right pain every time. Can't just log in. This Zoom's easy.
Brilliant, though, aren't they? As Susan said, what would we have done without it? I remember being tech-phobic at the beginning, thinking, I'll never learn how to do this.
You'd never have seen your family.
We all
You'd
use
never
it,
have seen
absolutely.
people, yeah.
We all know how to do it now, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Now, from all things technological to getting back to the wild, as it were, because Rewilding is back as the Wildlife Trust launched their plan to transform nature recovery in the UK. They've had a £6 million grant.
Yes, these environmental charities will be using that money to support the creation of landscape-scale rewilding projects, including a coast-to-coast transformation of Hadrian's Wall.
Good. Let's get the details from the Director of Landscape Recovery at Wildlife Trust, Dr. Rob Stoneman. Good to see you this morning. So what exactly is happening here?
Yeah, look, big thank you to the Ecological Restoration Fund. They've given us £6 million. There's a lot of money for nature conservation. And we're looking at four things, really. So we're looking at how we can coordinate work to bring back wildlife at a landscape scale. You talked about Hadrian's Wall corridor earlier, the Severn Valley we're looking at as well. We want to buy land in the middle of these landscape areas just as an exemplar and to inspire people about how we might do this. Remove barriers to the recolonisation of some of our so-called keystone species. These are the species that allow an explosion of wildlife. Beaver would be a good example. And we've got some money to help restore the ecology of Welsh waters and also our fantastic coastline.
I mean, as you said, it's an awful lot of money, but it's an awful lot of work you've got to do over enormous areas. How long will it be before we'll actually see some sort of a change?
Yeah, I mean, these are decadal landscape, because we're going to work alongside our farming communities, our foresters, the people that live and work in that area. So this isn't about forcing a change onto a landscape. This is about working alongside people and helping people improve their farm businesses and so on in a way that delivers, in a way that restores our nature and makes those farming communities more prosperous. So we're really excited by that prospect. So we might see, for example, a switch from sheep to cattle. We might see more nature tourism businesses. We might see more forestry in the landscape and so on. And in that way, we can rebuild the wildlife and rebuild rural communities at the same time. So it's quite exciting.
I wonder what... we talk about rewilding. I don't know if do we know what it really means? I mean, I know you know, but I mean, for punters like us, do we really know what you're actually talking about?
Yeah, I mean, some people sort of say, "Oh, we're going to bring back wolves and bears." That's not really what rewilding's about in Europe. No, really, there's kind of three things to think about with rewilding. So one is, how do we connect nature back together, because we've really fragmented it. So that's the first thing that's really important. The second thing is, how do we recreate the web of life? And this concept of keystone species. Think about an arch. If you take the keystone away, the wall falls apart, or the arch falls apart. So there's certain species that are really important. So big grazing animals, some of our top predators, and things like beavers in our river valleys. These are really important species to bring back. And then the third thing that we need to think about is how can we do this? How can we do this at scale? And scale allows you to create these random processes, these natural processes, things like rivers meandering, trees dying, but staying upright. So you've got lots of dead wood in a woodland landscape. Oak glades opening and cattle wallowing in the mud and so on. So all these natural processes create diversity and create an explosion of wildlife. So it brings wildlife back into our systems that we've lost.
How important is it that you do it? I know there'll be a lot of people watching at the moment who say, oh, it sounds a bit namby-pamby and green. We could spend that much money on something else. How important is it that you get on with this now?
That's really fundamental. You know, we're in a nature and climate crisis. The two crises are completely inextricably intertwined. You can't solve one without the other. And nature is so important for us. It's important for our health. You know, it just makes us feel better and happier. And we know that that's enormously important. It's important, for example, our pollinating insects that pollinate a third of all British crops. So it's fundamental to our food supply. It's fundamental to clean water, to clean air. So it's not just about restoring wildlife. It's not a green thing to do. You know, it's not just a nice thing to do. This is fundamental to us carrying on as a civilization. We really are at a bit of a brink at the moment. So we've really got to start to hit this.
Dr. Stoneman, good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Right, should we get a check on the weather?
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Good morning. A case of dodging the downpours today and tomorrow. The long weekends will stay on the cool side, but it should get a little drier as the weekend goes on. Many of us starting a little chilly out there this morning, but with some decent spells of sunshine. Clouds going to bubble up pretty rapidly through the morning, and then we'll see a scattering of showers developing. I suspect parts of eastern England will stay dry, and the showers fairly well scattered elsewhere, so some sunshine coming through. The main exception to that will be northern Scotland, where it stays wet and fairly windy as well. Always on the cool side, a fresher feel compared to yesterday across East Anglia and the southeast. Temperatures high teens at best for many. Still a few heavy showers around this evening, creating a bit of spray and surface water on the roads, staying fairly wet overnight across western Scotland, and fairly windy here as well. And that'll lead into another showery day tomorrow. Again, temperatures dipping down into single figures in rural spots, most towns and cities staying in double figures tonight. On to the weekend then, a bank holiday for many of us, of course. There will be some sunshine around on Saturday, but there will also be a lot of showers tomorrow. Some heavy ones likely over northern England, parts of Wales, but developing more widely again through the day. So you'll be lucky to stay completely dry tomorrow. The showers, where they do occur, could be pretty heavy and even thundery. And again, on the cool side for the time of year, temperatures high teens at best, but it should get a bit drier as we go through the weekend.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
So you put your heating on?
I was going to say, the weather's obviously quite warm, but I get cold in the mornings.
Brian says his house is 23.5 degrees this morning.
That is warm.
I don't know where you are, Brian, but that is warm. There you go. I think to open your windows. At least you're not having to put the energy on, which is good news. Though there's a new energy price cap being released today by
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK. Here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock on Friday, the 25th of August. Today, Donald Trump's mugshot is dominating the news, the first ever taken of a former president after being charged with trying to overturn the election results in 2020.
Our energy prices should drop this winter because Ofgem have announced the new energy price cap.
We'll have all the latest showbiz news, including more legal trouble for Lizzo.
And, of course, the very latest weather from Alex.
A cool start out there today with some sunshine. We are going to see a few showers developing, and then we're into the weekend. A bank holiday for many of us. I'll have a full forecast coming up later.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ann Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
We're in trouble already, and it's only 7 o'clock.
You're in trouble already. Well, it's because Stephen was saying, why do people get married? And you think that a lot of people get married for the wrong reason.
Yes. And Keith says, morning Keith, amongst the various reasons given for getting married, you did not mention the most important one, namely that you love your other half. Well, no, because I was sort of saying people get married for the wrong reasons. Whereas if you if you just do it out of love, if it's a pure love match, then that's the right reason. And I think you're less likely to have a divorce.
But people don't get married without love, do they? They might think they're in love, but you wouldn't get married.
In love.
Yeah, well, but that's what anyone thinks, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's odd.
A tricky one.
Yeah, it is. Paul says, I split up with my ex 11 years ago when I was 40. After 20 years, I'm still single. To be honest, I hate being single. And that's what I was wondering, is people who managed to stay married for a while, for long enough, to maybe have the kids grow up, why do they then want to get divorced? You would have thought if you stick together long enough, you've found a formula. Maybe you just don't feel you're happy enough. That's what it is. But it's a lonely business, I think, looking for love again at a certain age. Maybe it's a lonely business looking for love, full stop.
What was that drama? It was on the BBC. I never watched it, but my parents...
My Wife Next Door?
No, it was Halifax.
Ooh, no.
Was it New Love in Halifax or something? And it was about an older couple getting together and the kids not being happy and all that sort of thing.
More and more people...
Derek Jacobi was in it. And...
Oh, sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. I'll look up.
Stephen says, watching the segment about divorce, if you're unhappy after the kids are grown, that's all crazy. This attitude is another reason for people, men in particular, to not take the risk of marrying and having kids. You need to be sure.
I don't see how you can be.
What, when you get married?
Yeah, I think you're in love, aren't you? And that's why love is blind. You're blinded by love. You don't take rational decisions, do you, necessarily? Maybe you should. Maybe you should sit down and think, have we got enough money? Have we got the same sort of goals in life? But you don't. You're just love.
I think there are Because I remember the whole sort of if in doubt, don't.
Well, you'd never do anything then, would you?
Well, no, but when it comes to marriage...
And it's a wonderful thing to be blinded by love. It's a wonderful thing to be so in love that you don't question and you don't have doubts. I don't know. Let us know. Meaning of love, please, in a few words.
Yes.
Yeah, try that. gbviews@gbnews.com.
See, I'm an old romantic, you see.
Yes, you are. Yeah, but that's good to be, isn't it? It's a wonderful feeling, isn't it?
It is lovely, but you see, I was single for 20 years. Because I thought I couldn't settle. You know, a lot of people settle and they go, well, I don't want to be single, so I'm going to go dating. The one who seems the best, I'll go out with and see how it goes. I was never able to do that. Couldn't do it. I'd just rather be single than do that. Then I got hitched.
Yeah. No, you got bowled over by love.
I did get bowled over by love, yeah.
It's wonderful. Don't knock it. We're not knocking it. No. Should we talk about former US President Donald Trump? Because, he's made mugshots great again. He's voluntarily surrendered yesterday at the Fulton County Jail in Atlanta.
Yes, he faces 13 felony counts in the state of Georgia regarding efforts to allegedly overturn the state's 2020 presidential election result.
Never one to back down, he came out fighting, telling broadcasters that he has every right to challenge an election he feels is unfair.
Thank you very much for being here. I really believe this is a very sad day for America. This should never happen. If you challenge an election, you should be able to challenge an election. I thought the election was a rigged election, a stolen election, and I should have every right to do that. As you know, you have many people that you've been watching over the years do the same. What has taken place here is a travesty of justice. We did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong, and everybody knows it. I've never had such support, and that goes with the other ones, too. What they're doing is election interference. They're trying to interfere with an election. There's never been anything like it in our country before. This is their way of campaigning. And this is one instance, but you have 3 other instances. It's election interference. We did nothing wrong at all, and we have every right, every single right, to challenge an election that we think is dishonest, that we think is very dishonest.
Well, earlier on we spoke to the political analyst, Ronald Granieri. Here's what he had to say about that.
It certainly is. It's the only one we've ever had of a president of the United States, a former president. It is definitely a historic day, I guess, if you wanted to put it in the most value neutral terms you want to put it. It's a big deal. And it's a big deal, especially that the president is being charged, or the former president is being charged in a state court, not in a federal court.
What are we to make of the rhetoric that he comes out with? Because he's following his old pattern, isn't he, of coming out and saying, well, you know, I've done absolutely nothing wrong and everybody knows it. It's as though if he chants out the line that everyone believes him, it becomes true.
And that is his pattern, right? It's either everyone knows it, or in other circumstances he'll come out with the, people are saying, which then he presents as truth, because that way he doesn't have to say that I'm merely claiming this, but rather that it is somehow objective. Now, we can't be surprised that he says he's innocent, right? People always say they're innocent when they've been booked, and we don't. People are innocent until they're proven guilty in this country as well. But it's important to note that you can say whatever you want about an election. What you can't do, what you shouldn't do, is defame people without evidence, which is one of the things he's accused of doing. What you're not supposed to do is you're not supposed to encourage government officials in the absence of evidence to look for or find 11,680 votes. Those are the things that it's precisely this idea that there is a line between saying, I really think I won this election, and me claiming that person in particular stole it when there's no evidence that you can present that person did anything of the sort.
But this rhetoric, and he said it quite a few times, didn't he? I have the right, of course I have, to challenge the outcome of an election. And would that point towards that's basically going to be his defence?
It looks that way. It looks like that's one of the big defenses, is essentially, to use American terminology, is a First Amendment defense, is freedom of speech, freedom to petition the government to redress grievances, if that I'm free to do that, that anyone is free to do that. And so the big question is going to be, as a legal matter and as a matter of when they work out the facts in court, is whether whether Mr. Trump and his defendants here, the alleged co-conspirators, whether they crossed the line from merely expressing an opinion to actually trying to spread falsehoods, falsehoods that they were aware were false, or that they were encouraging government officials to do things that they knew were false and contrary to fact.
We didn't have breaking news there, by the way.
No.
Not sure what that was about.
Thing, though. It's just such a troubling situation. I'll tell you what I hate about it, and whatever you think of Trump or Biden or whatever's going on, it's the fact that it is a soap opera.
Yes.
It is just a soap opera, and someone's going to be the most important and politically influential person on the planet. And it's
nobody is going to be convinced by the outcome of the next election, I think, are they? If Trump wins, the other side will say, well, he won unfairly. And if he doesn't win, he won't stop his opposition, will he? And an awful lot of Trump fans, and there are so many, will always feel disgruntled.
Yeah. Mike says, criticism is fine, but you fail to mention that under Trump, the economy boomed, he prevented a nuclear war with North Korea and was the only president ever to not start a new war and even settle peace between other countries around the world. Actually, we did mention that.
We did.
We also said we had the threat of this exchange of missiles with North Korea going on for quite some time.
And that was frightening at the time, wasn't it?
It was frightening at the time.
And he went out there and spoke to them.
It didn't get us anywhere, but
it didn't. But it was sometimes it's just good to be seen to be speaking to your enemy, as it were.
Yes, yeah. Well, it was. No one else could have done that. Anyway, see, that's where he does have benefits. No one else could have gone and crossed into North Korea like that, and sort of had the chutzpah to get away with it.
There's sort of self-belief.
Yeah. Will says, Trump is a threat to civilization and exemplifies greed, self-serving aims and probably the worst case of nepotism the USA could inflict on the world. That's a very valid point. A lot of people would agree with you.
Yes, and that's it, isn't it? That's what I mean. It's dividing America.
Yeah. Well, and honestly...
And unless he wins or stands down, there's a huge segment of America who's going to feel very, very disgruntled.
But isn't that always the way with the States? Because whenever there's a presidential election, it's always pretty much 50-50.
Yes, every
time.
Yes, sort of.
But what I find interesting is the idea that, and I heard an analyst say it a while ago, say that Trump is the only candidate that Republicans can put forward who Biden could beat.
Trump is the only candidate.
The only candidate that Biden could beat.
That Biden could beat.
And I think that's because although people don't like Biden, it will polarise the situation. Whereas any other Republican candidate would probably win because people are a bit disillusioned with Biden.
With Biden, yeah. It's not a great choice, though, is it? I think for America.
No, I don't think it's a good choice. They're, young blood. You need to. I mean, I'm surprised Biden has put himself forward again.
I am. He doesn't look terribly well.
No, he doesn't.
And you can't have confidence in him. His age is unfortunately showing badly.
It is. Well, I mean,
I know he's a good... I mean, a lot of people say he's a very, very impressive man. He's got a terrific pedigree and all the rest of it. But sometimes maybe you just are too old and you should recognise it. Don't know.
Yeah, I just think you're too old. But I would apply that to Trump as well, to be fair.
Yes, yeah.
Because they're not that dissimilar in age.
He looks healthier, though, somehow, Trump, doesn't he?
He's
bigger. He's bigger, he's got presence. He's stronger speaking.
But then when he was...
I'm sorry, I'm not campaigning for him, I'm just pointing it out.
But when he was president, he then comes out with the nonsense saying, I'm the healthiest president there's ever been.
Yeah, well...
all that sort of stuff.
Everything, he says, is bigger, better than ever has been. But it's extraordinary what's happening in the USA. But look at the other side of the world and to Russia and what has been going on. Because the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, went on TV sent his condolences to the family of Yevgeny Prigozhin, the former leader of the mercenary Wagner Group, who was, of course, amongst the 10 people killed somehow in a plane crash north of Moscow.
Yes. It's all very odd because, I mean, the suspicion is that Putin had it bombed.
Yeah.
The aircraft, as you can see from these disturbing images, hurtling downwards, trailing smoke, an onboard explosion, they think, was the likely cause for the crash.
And of course, you have to remember what happened because his death occurs 2 months to the day since he led an abortive mutiny against the military top brass, something Putin actually described himself as treacherous.
Yeah, so what happens next in all of this? Let's talk to military and defence analyst Colonel Simon Diggins, who joins us now. Really good to see you this morning. I mean, look, the big question here is, does the death of Prigozhin, if it has actually happened, does that strengthen or weaken Putin?
I think in the short term, it strengthens him. It removes an alternative centre of power, an alternative centre of opposition to what he's trying to do in terms of the conduct of the war. Prigozhin, as well as irritating Putin, had also managed to irritate many of the senior Russian generals, and Defence Minister and Gerasimov, who was the chief of defence staff. So he'd managed to irritate them as well. At the same time, as you probably remember, Putin also removed a man called Surovkin, who was the chief of aerospace forces and known as General Armageddon, who's also been seen as linking himself with Prigozhin and the Wagner Group. And so what Putin's done in the short term has removed these sort of centres of opposition to him. So in the short term, I think he is stronger, but the long term, I'm not so sure.
Can I just ask, being terribly cynical, why Prigozhin would have been on board a plane with so many of his top people? And do you think there's any chance at all that this is a staged event? It didn't actually happen. I mean, yes, a plane fell out of the sky, but we don't for sure know that these people were killed, do we?
No, not absolutely sure. And I don't think anyone absolutely sure about it. Unless there's a sort of full DNA analysis of and there were, 10 people died in that accident. A full DNA analysis of the bodies. We can't be absolutely sure. But certainly the news that's coming from them and the fact that Putin has, if you like, has publicly announced the death of Prigozhin, sent his condolences to the family, suggests at least the outward side of it is that, yes, he's definitely dead. He's certainly dead in terms of, his ability to influence events. And maybe what was promised to Prigozhin was you can escape the country and all will be forgiven your sins. So he was kind of lured onto the aircraft and given an offer he couldn't refuse. And this is the result.
I mean, are you pretty confident that, well, A, he is dead and that B, Putin did it?
I think nothing happens in Russia, nothing that certainly of this scale that does not have Putin behind it. That is the kind of reality of it. Now, what you do have, of course, is what you might call plausible deniability, and that's straight out of the kind of the KGB game book. And Putin let's never forget, was a KGB agent. He was trained in them, and until the fall of the Soviet Union, was a very active member of the KGB. And they have the ability, and they have done in the past, these sorts of operations. And there's always this element of plausible deniability. So there's always a potential alternative story to what's the one that comes out. It may not be very credible, but there's a story that people can hang their hats on.
That plane came down about 150 miles north of Moscow, we're told. And where it landed, there are already heaps of floral tributes and Russian people, including Wagner fighters, weeping there openly in front of everybody. You wouldn't, I mean, do you find that surprising?
Not particularly. I think it's very interesting. When the mutiny took place and when his forces, the Wagner Group forces, were in Rostov-on-Don, there was clearly a huge amount of popular support for him. I think the Russian attitude towards this war is fascinating. I mean, on the one hand, generally speaking, they believe the propaganda that Putin's regime has come out, that they're trying to remove a group of neo-Nazis, drug dealers, whatever, from Ukraine. And then, of course, the Russians are a genuinely patriotic people. And so if they see somebody who appears to be fighting rather better for what they regard as the important thing they're doing, which is conducting this campaign against the regime in Kyiv, then they tend to support him. They're also, if you like, caught up in the passion of the war itself. And I think that's always one of the things we always need to be careful of with wars. Wars often start for what appear to be, certainly at the time, rational reasons. But during the course of wars, passion builds in, casualties come in, emotions build up. And I think people then take very much harder lines and much harder sides on that. So I'm not particularly surprised that he received this level of support. But of course, that's also why Putin was so worried about him. Because Putin would also have seen what happened in Rostov-on-Don and gone, this is not good. This is not just somebody who is fighting very well for him. He has if you like, a constituency of his own. And that's not something that Putin was prepared to put up with.
But does that mean then, in terms of, we see Putin's comments about this and offering his condolences, and we just see through it. I mean, it's almost laughable. It is like something from a Bond film. But if we look at it through Russian eyes, are the Russian people sort of believing him and thinking that, yeah, he is sorry that this man is dead?
I think that there's always a mixed element in there. I mean, one of the few saving graces, if you like, of the Soviet Union was the amount of rather cynical humour that came out. And there was an outstanding satirical magazine called Crocodile, where, if you like, some of the lies and sort of talks from the Soviet Union came through. So there's an element of cynicism within Russia about their leadership, which is there. But there's also, I think, this sense of, there's a war going on, and we need to back people who are fighting the war. And I think they saw him in those terms. He was popular.
Does this death make any difference to the war in Ukraine?
It does, I think, but it's probably short term. I think the implications are much wider than just the war in Ukraine. But in the short term, I think it gives a degree more coherence to the Russian leadership. As I said, whilst the Wagner troops have been used very much as kind of shock troops in places like Bakhmut last year and earlier on this year, the Russian leadership was divided, and it's still not particularly coherent, but it certainly was significantly more divided with Wagner and his men. So I think it gives them an opportunity to be a bit more coherent, a bit more cogent in what they're trying to do. The longer term, I think, it is more problematic. I think it shows a deep degree of weakness strategically within Russia itself. I mean, if the only way you, as the leader of a state, can deal with opposition is to murder just not to the opponent, but 9 other people, that is a weak state. It may be a very sort of strong on the surface side, but actually it's brittle. What's going to knock it, I do not know, and that could be a long time coming. But that's not a strong state. You do not murder people because they are your opponents, and that is exactly what Putin has done.
Colonel Diggins, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
My pleasure.
More analysis on that coming up, of course. But let's get a check on your weather with Alex.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Good morning. A case of dodging the downpours today and tomorrow. The long weekends will stay on the cool side, but it should get a little drier as the weekend goes on. Many of us starting a little chilly out there this morning, but with some decent spells of sunshine. Clouds going to bubble up pretty rapidly through the morning, and then we'll see a scattering of showers developing. I suspect parts of eastern England will stay dry, and the showers fairly well scattered elsewhere, so some sunshine coming through. The main exception to that will be northern Scotland, where it stays wet and fairly windy as well. Always on the cool side, a fresher feel compared to yesterday across East Anglia and the southeast. Temperatures high teens at best for many. Still a few heavy showers around this evening, creating a bit of spray and surface water on the roads, staying fairly wet overnight across western Scotland, and fairly windy here as well. And that'll lead into another showery day tomorrow. Again, temperatures dipping down into single figures in rural spots, most towns and cities staying in double figures tonight. On to the weekend then. A bank holiday for many of us, of course. There will be some sunshine around on Saturday, but there will also be a lot of showers tomorrow. Some heavy ones likely over northern England, parts of Wales, but developing more widely again through the day. So you'll be lucky to stay completely dry tomorrow. The showers, where they do occur, could be pretty heavy and even thundery. And again, on the cool side for the time of year, temperatures high teens at best, but it should get a bit drier as we go through the weekend.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're going to find out what's going on in the world of showbiz in a few moments. Stephanie Tecci will be joining us to tell us about this woman called...
Lizzo,
who we'd never heard of until about 2 weeks ago.
We are now, because we're down with the kids.
Absolutely, yeah. Hey, you're watching Breakfast on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good
You paused
morning.
there with your views.
Yeah, yes, we were talking earlier about whether you should stay together for the sake of the children, even if you want to divorce. Because apparently the over 50s now, that's the only sort of segment of society where divorce rate is rising. And it's thought that people have stayed together for the sake of the children. Once the children are a certain age, they get divorced. But Andy in Dorset says, "You only have one life. Don't waste it getting married. The thought of it sends shivers up my spine. I'm off to the pub." It's
Well, good on
quite
you.
early in the morning to be off to the pub.
I
but
sort of
okay.
think, Andy, you shouldn't be getting married. But that's fair enough.
Les in Newcastle tells a story that I stayed in my first marriage for the children. We separated when my kids were 18 and 14, and it was devastating for them. I have no relationship with my 36-year-old son now, and have only just reconciled with my daughter after 5 years. I was seen as the bad guy. My second marriage is the total opposite, built on love and friendship. I've adopted my 2 stepsons and have a wonderful relationship with them. Today is my 13th wedding anniversary. So all I can say to you, Les, is happy wedding anniversary. You've made it work for you in the end, haven't you?
Yeah, well,
that's great.
I hope it sorts itself out.
Just shows life is up and down, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? Now we've got some breaking news for you this morning. The energy regulator Ofgem has just announced the next price cap for October to December, last quarter of the year. £1,923 for the average household in England, Wales and Scotland. That's dropping from just over £2,000 in July.
Not dropping a lot, though, is it? Analysts say a typical annual bill could be £150 cheaper this winter. But with reduced help from the government and higher fixed costs for many, will we actually see much difference in what we pay?
Let's hear from the Director of Export Unlocked, Richard Bartlett, who joins us this morning. Good to see you, Richard. Look, I guess that there's various arguments here. We may not see a huge difference in our pocket, but if the government isn't bailing us out, we benefit in different ways.
Yeah, good morning, Anne and Stephen. Good to see you this morning. Yeah, I mean, it's a positive that we're seeing a little drop in the cost. Obviously, the predicting it's lower than since 2021, but it's still high, and it's still high to the consumer. Obviously, people paying by direct debit are paying a reasonable amount. It's still very high, and we're going to see. Depending on how winter comes. I mean, if we have a cold, snap winter, it's a worrying sign for elderly and other people that even though it's been reduced, it's still a high cost no matter how we look at it.
Now, last year we had a bit of help from the government to pay these bills. We're not going to this, or what do you think? Will we get any help from the government this winter?
I think there'll be a bit of pressure there, Anne. I think there'll be pressure from people pushing that on government. It'll be interesting to see what happens. There is a worry that there won't be much help there, but I think there's a lot of pressure, and obviously we've got elections on the way, so we might see a bit of generosity by the government. But again, we're not seeing much from it, so that's always the worry. And this now the time to start looking at your energy costs and start looking around? We've never really suggested that in the past, but maybe it's a good time now to start looking what you're spending, because we just pay direct debit, we pay it every month. Are we in credit? Are we not in credit? What are we actually physically paying? I think I'm in credit by about £480 on my bill. And how does that affect many people? There's a lot of people in that situation who don't pay by direct debit. And this is the one thing we forget about, Anna, Stephen, that, that's the biggest worry to me, is there going to be support there for the people who really, really need it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in that sense, there's an argument to be made, isn't there, for not having universal support like we have all enjoyed and actually doing it in effect, means testing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I always think that the most vulnerable, we've highlighted this on GB News for the last well over a year now, and we've really seen the vulnerable really affected when they're having to use meters, they're having to go to the shops to get the cards, get the money on there. And you make a choice when you're in that situation. You got really high bills. You start switching off things. Obviously, I've got an 89-year-old mother who worries about heating. She's very fortunate. She's got myself. But how does that affect people who don't have that support from family? How does that support the vulnerable people? That's always the worry. So, yeah, it's a difficult one. And I always think they don't look at it's the vulnerable who are affected more than anybody.
The vulnerable, but also depending on where you live as well. For instance, we've already had a viewer, Yvonne, morning Yvonne, get in touch saying, inside my house in North Shropshire at the moment, it's only 15 degrees. I've had my central heating on now for the second time this summer. So maybe it's about where you live as well and how cold things get.
Yeah, I mean, I'm up here in Saddleworth on the Saddleworth Moors. We get extreme cold weather here in the winter. So again, depending where you live, what areas you're in, it affects different ways. And I've always said in the south of England, it always seems warmer than it is in the north where I live. And it's, yeah, I mean, if you're at home, and the other thing you've got to think, and if you're sat at home, or a lot of people now working from home. So when you're working from home, you have the heating on a lot. When you're elderly, you have the heating on. And my biggest fear with that is that people, particularly the elderly or the vulnerable, start switching off rooms where they're not particularly using, and it just ends up no heating there at all. And that has a huge effect because they're just heating pocket rooms, which, again, that concerns me.
Yeah. Richard, it might be colder up north, but we all know it's a little bit better. There's no arguing.
Hearts
There's
are
no
warmer.
arguing. Hearts are warmer. The hands are warmer. Richard, really good to see you this morning. Thanks
Thank you.
very much indeed.
Maybe that's why I've been getting cold in the morning. It's just because I'm sort of wandering around on my own, not doing anything, not going anywhere. You know, I'm at home.
Oh, well, maybe. Yeah, getting out and about.
I have to get out and about during the week as well.
Put a jumper on.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I'm saying. Bed socks.
Bed socks, yeah.
Just wander around, shuffle around in your bed socks. The added advantage as well is you polish the floor as you go.
Oh, well, there you go, you see.
Woolly bed socks.
Unless you've got carpet, then it's just static.
No, I've got a wooden floor and it just polishes as I go. You can tell where I've wandered.
Oh, very good. It's like a snail.
That's right. Yeah, let's not go there.
OK, look, let's turn our attention to the glamorous world of showbiz. It's always glamorous because Stephanie Tetchy is here. Good morning.
Good morning, Stephen and Anne.
Lovely to see you. Should we have a bit of spice?
Yeah, we should. I like a bit of spice.
I know you do.
Let's talk about Spice Girls now. So next year is going to be... Next year's going to be their 30th anniversary.
Wow.
So there's been a lot of talk about what are they going to be doing to market. Will they be doing Glastonbury? They have yet to confirm whether they will, because Victoria Beckham seems to be dragging her feet on whether she wants to return to the stage. But last night it's come out that they're actually planning a movie. So they're in advanced talks for a jukebox musical. So the
what does that mean?
So unfortunately, it means the ladies won't actually be in the film. But what it... Ooh.
It's gone.
Oh,
there you go.
So there you are. The
That's
ladies.
on you, darling, as it should be.
I should be in the Spice Girls, 6-member. But the ladies won't actually be in the movie, so it'll be based on a Spice fan, girl or boy, and they'll just be playing the hits through the movie. Apparently, Jerry Horner, who's Ginger Spice, apparently she's kind of leading the talks for the production stuff. But
that's like an ABBA movie.
Yeah, it is. So it's more going to be like a sing-along, which I think is a shame, but I think it could be quite interesting. I think we know them for all the songs that they've created, so to see it brought to life. We saw Spice World, which came out about, I think it's almost 26 years ago now.
Crumbs.
So
Wow.
It's been that long, which stars Richard E. Grant.
I mean, what a fabulous film that was.
I think they should have done a follow-up to that.
Oh, come on.
Stop it. I won't let you speak badly of the Spice Girls or their movie.
Well, anything they do would be incredibly
It would be, and I think if they'd done a follow-up to that, that would have been lovely to see them all together. But obviously time's gone on, but the one good thing about bands such as the Spice Girls, they can always make money, no matter what they do, you know.
I suppose they feel it's a bit like Sex and the City, isn't it? When they're coming back on now and they're older. I mean, there's no doubt they are older.
I know, but they're getting slated. Sometimes, like, some things you should just leave how they are and don't spoil it. Like, now the new spin-off Sex and the City is making a mockery of all the classics that we've loved, and with the different characters, you've got Samantha who's kind of just rolling solo without the ladies. It's just, ooh.
Yeah, all a bit weird.
Some things you leave behind.
I'll tell you what disturbs me about this, the Glastonbury thing.
Yeah.
Is this true that Victoria Beckham is not keen because she doesn't want to do anything that requires live singing?
I thought that was a bit of a saucy comment. Well, when it comes to the Spice Girls reuniting, it always seems that Victoria has been dragging her feet.
Yeah, she's always the one they can't quite sign.
No, she's got this big fashion career now. She wants to be known more as a fashion designer. I think she had the big moment for the London Olympics, but I guess to get back on stage is not as easy as people say. You don't just turn up on the day. It takes a lot of, practicing, a lot of training, and maybe her head's just not interested in it.
Also, I mean, she's a multi-millionairess.
Yeah.
Why do it if you don't have to?
Well, that's the thing. Her fame was based off the Spice Girls, so I think for those big moments, if you still love the band and you still love the ladies, like, they're still all good friends. I don't think there's any of them that's fallen out. I think then maybe, why not for a special occasion? But I guess she's...
But the others need it more than her.
Yeah, they do, because she's like a brand. She's like brand Beckham with David. And the thing is, when you're in the fashion world, then to be looking like you're a pop star as well, I think she feels like it damages Victoria Beckham.
And she's very image-conscious. Clearly she is. She likes to be seen in a certain light.
Yep.
She might not like exposing herself, as it were, looking older.
Well, that's why she's Posh Spice, and she's all over Instagram. She's always showing pictures of her doing her treatments and all that stuff. So this is why people love her. So get back on stage, Vic.
people fell out of love a little bit, or some did, with Lizzo.
Yeah.
But she's fighting back.
She is. We know about cancel culture. Usually when people are getting sued, they just take it lying down, but clearly Lizzo is not having it. It was only a few weeks ago we were speaking about how her backup dancers were suing her for creating a hostile work environment, for fat shaming. There was so many allegations, including sexual harassment. She's now come back and she's suing them for malicious prosecution. So malicious prosecution, what that means is that basically the police have pursued a charge against her with not any evidence or any meaning, because some of the dancers have said they forced her to go to a club. She forced them to go to a club in Paris to dance with strip dancers. She's now got pictures of them enjoying themselves, and they stayed on the tour afterwards. So she's clearly not taking it lying down.
OK, oh well, we shall see how that one unfolds.
Yeah.
Stephanie, we'll see you a little bit later on.
See you a bit later.
Thank you. Still to come, we'll take you through all the news and views from the newspapers. That's coming up next on Breakfast.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know,
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant, the big green, my superstar panel that are already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
7:42, good morning. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Talking of marriage.
Oh, yes.
Kathleen, morning Kathleen, says we were married because we had a £60 tax rebate. We'd only known each other for 12 weeks. Now we've been married 50 years, through thick and thin. We've got 3 daughters and grandchildren with 3 great-grandchildren. So maybe the tax rebate thing works.
60 quid.
Yeah.
Elizabeth says, like you, Stephen, I was on my own for many years and wasn't looking for love. Then I met my husband when I was 39 and we married 2 years later.
Oh.
We were so incredibly happy for 17 wonderful years, but cancer took him from me in January.
Oh, so sorry. But
I feel very blessed for those years together.
Yeah, we've ended up talking about marriage and what makes a good marriage and what makes love, I suppose. That's the big question. What's this? Oh, this one. Simon, morning Simon, says, my first wife died when I was 38. She was the love of my life. Then 4 years later, I met someone new, got married, and it was a disaster. It lasted only 6 months. Be careful who you marry.
Yes, well...
Thanks for the
Even
warning.
4 years on, it sounds like a bit of a reboundy thing, doesn't it? Never good. Anyway, keep your thoughts coming through, gbviews@gbnews.com. Let's have a look through the papers with the author and journalist Susan Holder and co-founder of the Together Association, Alan Miller. Good morning.
Good morning to you both.
Susan, what's this in the Daily Mail about getting on your bike?
Right, well, yeah, On Your Bike Vogue is the headline because Vogue magazine has published its annual list for 2023 of its 25 powerhouse women. I've checked, Anne, and neither of us are there.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
I know. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't expect me to be there, but it's an absolute travesty that you're not.
Absolute travesty.
However, I had to Google who was on the list other than the person who's getting the headlines, because the person getting the headlines, annoyingly, is the only sports representative who is transgender. And Emily Bridges, and you may not have heard of Emily Bridges, and it would be understandable if you hadn't, because her sporting success seemed to have peaked with winning the national junior men's record in 2018.
Oh, it's one of those stories again, isn't it?
And it is one of those stories. So I decided not to talk too much about that and Google instead who was on the list, because I was quite interested to know who other people were. And some of the people who are not mentioned in the papers are Kylie Minogue, the actress Jodie Comer, Killing Eve, who's a fantastic actress,
good.
the designer Sarah Burton, Camilla is there.
Behind Burton's.
No, she's not behind Burton's. I think
isn't she in...
I think she worked for Alexander McQueen.
That's what I was going to say.
And designed...
Catherine's wedding dress.
Correct. Well done, we got that.
Yeah.
And Penny Mordaunt is also on there.
Oh.
And there's other people. There's designers, activists, there's some models and entrepreneurs. And if you're interested in that list, I would suggest you go and maybe look at it. Although I don't know why we're doing Vogue any favours, because I don't think it really is... when we've got so much female sporting heroes in this country, we don't even have to think...
That's why Vogue has done it,
well, do you think
to get
so
us talking about it?
And we are talking about it, but I don't also think it does the transgender women much good, if that is the only person that they can put up.
No.
Really.
And knowing it's a sport and trans is a controversial issue
correct.
At the best of time, so they would be
That's
better
why it's
off
there.
thinking
Correct.
of the trans.
So it's a bit of a... maybe it is a bit of a cynical ploy by Vogue.
Well, it might be there because they genuinely believe it, and I think that's one of the bigger problems, because it's not just Vogue that believes that, it's a lot of
what? That is a person who is...
That she belongs in a woman's race.
It's our companies, it's across the board. We have kind of policies that insist on it. In fact, Graham Stringer's got a very interesting piece today as well on this question, just about trans ideologies seeking total power.
Yes.
And it's not about trans people. This is about activists that also want to cancel and prevent anyone who raises questions. He makes the point that actually Dawn Butler got up and said that sex is undecided in children. And he's talking about X chromosomes and X and Y, and he thought that was about just biological sex being clear. So I'm not sure. It is just trying to get press and PR. I think that people have bought into this and they're trying to kind of impose it as though, and then if you challenge it or ask questions, you're presented as beyond the pale, and that's a real problem.
It is a problem, yeah.
OK.
Which is why we have to keep doing it.
Yeah, but a lot of the issues with this is a lot of people with the loudest voices are the people with the least understanding.
Well, also, what's happened is that some of these activists have taken hold in our public and private sector without a debate with the public. Once the public's involved, they think this is preposterous. But you see, it's not about being democratic and winning hearts and minds. They've attempted to capture institutions, and it's become problematic. But I would say that many, particularly brave women, in the last couple of years have turned that around, and I think we need to have more of that.
I think so too.
Do you really?
I think women have to start standing up to this and saying that we need to protect female spaces and we need to have women... From what? From men being able to use all spaces that they want. And, and also having to define what a woman is all the time. Nobody ever asks a man what to define a man, but we're constantly having to redefine ourselves or be recalled a cis woman. I'm not a cis woman, I'm a woman. I don't need another little prefix against my name to tell me who I am or to tell anybody else who I am. And if people want to be transgender and, you know, live how they want, that's fine. But they can't impose different rules and different on everybody else. And it isn't safe for women to have men able to go into any space they want.
Then, yes, but now the issue with that is that that isn't about trans women and not men.
No, it's not. No,
so you're talking about people who are
pretending
to be trans.
And you are, and but that is the door you've opened, isn't it?
Yeah, but you end up having...
And why are we the ones to compromise on that?
You end up having generating anti-trans feeling.
But it isn't anti-trans. It's protecting women. But you're redefining it as anti-trans. I think. Do you see what I mean? I think.
I see what you mean, but I disagree.
But also, trans women in female sports is also an entirely different area, isn't it?
But that is the problem. You can't just have people saying, "Well, this is what I am now, so I can do whatever I want." I mean, and also, it's an interesting debate for me because men who transition to women and they go, "Oh, but we're being told what to do." Well, welcome to being a woman. That's a bit what it's like. And it has.
It's always been problematic.
It's always been a bit problematic.
I just think, I don't want to harp on about this issue. I just think there's a huge. I don't know if misogyny is the right word about it. There's always an issue with men becoming women or men who are perceived as being feminine or sissy or pansy or whatever. When it goes the other way around, it's like there's always an issue with gay men, never with lesbians.
Well,
and there's no issue at all. Half the trans community are women who've become men. They're not in any of these stories because nobody cares.
Well, because they're not actually in. They're not because they're not. From what I can see, the ones, and it is true that it's small examples, but smaller examples are important. Yeah. If you're in a refuge centre, a women's refuge centre, or if you happen to be in a prison, or if you've been a rapist or an abductor, or if, like the recent character who'd been a torturer and abuser, who was then telling people to smash women in the face, smash the TERFs in the face. We've seen violent attacks on women at Speaker's Corner in Australia, internationally. We've seen a kind of a situation where very, very aggressive, what was associated with male behaviour, it's not gender specific, any aggressive behaviour, but interestingly, you know, where you have this, and I think the big problem is it's really important to thrash these out and to discuss these points. But we've been in a climate where people have been cancelled, shut down, they've been attempted to have their livelihoods ruined for the outrage of asking questions and saying, I don't agree with that. That's where the real issue is here with this.
It's how you ask it. I agree you've got to be able to ask and question things, but it's how you do it, I think. But anyway...
From the transfer debate, how about exams? GCSEs, Alan?
Yes, so, well, we see maybe a tale of two cities where the report today is that London-centric policies are blamed for the north-south exam results gap. And basically what this report is talking about, the GCSEs, 28% of London got A's or A+, where under 18% in the North East did. And the thinking behind this is that the consequences of policies around COVID, around lockdowns, the cost of living crisis, the way there's a disproportionate impact on the North East to the South, all to do with issues around levelling up and questions around what, you know, David Goodhart has called the somewheres, people who are not in the sort of cosy metropolitan areas, but what that really means. And it looks at the differential. And whilst some are attempting to say, well, look, we've had a great bounce back and better results all round, is a definite differential. Interestingly, some have argued that, you know, this would give rise to the need for a differential approach to education, a bit more like you have in the States, where you have some more charter schools and others. We know that some of the academies have done quite well, but it's certainly the case that, and it's always been the case, that some people from wealthier backgrounds, particularly in the South East, are doing better, and this has been accentuated here. I do think that the consequence of lockdowns. The article makes the point in The Guardian that a lot of people not returning to school, a lot of children not returning to school, particularly in the north and the northeast, has had consequences. The consequences of lockdowns and policies around COVID we're seeing play out, as we said we would, in damaging ways.
OK. Interesting points, I'm sure. Let's just finish off with Susan in the Mail, the wonky pub.
The wonky pub.
Right, what I don't understand about this is, and arson, bad, all the rest of it, bad.
Yeah.
But so many headlines over a derelict pub that was burnt down.
Yes, I know.
It's weird, isn't it?
It is weird, but it is a story that I've been following as a Black Country girl, and I did work on the Black Country Bugle as my first ever newspaper. So I have been following this story. It was a very unusual pub that had all very wonky, outside and inside, and very quirky, and clearly it was much loved. Now the question, of course, is: was it loved enough to be used enough and to be a good going concern? And if it had been, maybe this wouldn't have happened to it. But it does look like that people wanted to use the area for something else, possibly, and that is why it's met its demise. And there were lots of kind of things that went on that people have been very angry about all over social media, particularly in the Black Country. There's lots of campaigns. But they have now arrested 2 men over the possible arson. But more interesting, I thought, they've also actually, the local councillors have made them leave the bricks and the foundations
because they want it rebuilt, don't they?
At the site, and they're being protected at the moment because they are looking to try and rebuild this, which would be very interesting if they managed to do that. And then maybe it would be a very, very popular place and people will go back to it.
I think maybe it would. Susan, Alan, we need to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed.
Should we catch up with the weather?
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Good morning. A case of dodging the downpours today and tomorrow. The long weekends will stay on the cool side, but it should get a little drier as the weekend goes on. Many of us starting a little chilly out there this morning, but with some decent spells of sunshine. Clouds going to bubble up pretty rapidly through the morning, and then we'll see a scattering of showers developing. I suspect parts of eastern England will stay dry, and the showers fairly well scattered elsewhere, so some sunshine coming through. The main exception to that will be northern Scotland, where it stays wet and fairly windy as well. Always on the cool side, a fresher feel compared to yesterday across East Anglia and the southeast. Temperatures high teens at best for many. Still a few heavy showers around this evening, creating a bit of spray and surface water on the roads, staying fairly wet overnight across western Scotland, and fairly windy here as well. And that'll lead into another showery day tomorrow. Again, temperatures dipping down into single figures in rural spots, most towns and cities staying in double figures tonight. On to the weekend then, a bank holiday for many of us, of course. There will be some sunshine around on Saturday, but there will also be a lot of showers tomorrow. Some heavy ones likely over northern England, parts of Wales, but developing more widely again through the day. So you'll be lucky to stay completely dry tomorrow. The showers, where they do occur, could be pretty heavy and even thundery. And again, on the cool side for the time of year, temperatures high teens at best, but it should get a bit drier as we go through the weekend.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What's love got to do with it? That's what I say. As Tina Turner once said, Richard says maybe people do marry for love, but then wake up one morning and discover they don't actually like each other. I don't think so.
Love and like is different as well, though, isn't it?
Love and marriage go together like a horse and carriage.
Should make a song out of that.
Yeah. If you're struggling to make sense out of love.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, 8 o'clock, Friday the 25th of August. Today, well, this is the mugshot dominating the news, the first ever taken of a former president, Mr. Trump, after he was charged with trying to overturn the election results in 2020.
Our energy prices might actually drop this winter as Ofgem announce the new energy price cap.
We've got the latest showbiz news, including some revelations about Jennifer Aniston's romantic life.
She still looks so fabulous, doesn't she?
Yes, she does. It's sickening.
It is. Let's have the latest weather from Alex.
A cool start out there today with some sunshine. We are going to see a few showers developing, and then we're into the weekend. A bank holiday for many of us. I'll have a full forecast coming up later.
Morning to you, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
See, Jennifer Aniston's had a few divorces. She's been married, well, she was married to Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
But did she not marry that other fella?
Don't know.
She was with him for a while. But she's, why is it that she's so, she looks fabulous, but also we have this warmth for her. I don't know what she's like in real life. I've no idea.
No, I've never met her either. But she, I mean, she was such a wonderful character in Friends, and of course that ran for so many years. So you feel you know her. But also a lot of the other work she's done have been comedies. She's a very, very good comic actress.
Yes.
She's done comic films with dogs, hasn't she? There was a famous dog one.
Oh, Marley and Me.
Marley and Me, which was wonderful. And so maybe she's done the sort of movies, she's done the sort of parts that makes you feel very warm towards her.
Yeah.
She's the girl next door, isn't she? Without being...
Isn't she?
She impossibly the girl next door, but she really is. One of the news stories during the week sometime was that she's got this new beauty product that she's trying out. Salmon sperm. Yeah.
Can't believe you said that on television.
Yeah, apparently. Goodness knows
How you
you'll
get it.
harvest it. Exactly. But apparently it's very good for the skin. I cannot even think why it would be. But there you go. It's not one that I think many women are going to try and copy.
No.
Sorry, does that put you off your breakfast?
No, it's just so many things I could say.
I know.
But I'm not going to. It reminds me of an episode of That's Life. Do you remember That's Life with Esther Ranson? And one of the things, I remember they were trying out some new beauty product once, and it was made from cow's placenta.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the thing. I remember them trying that out on. I mean,
That's almost a well-known one now, I think.
Cow placenta,
yeah,
is it?
you can travel to clinics in Switzerland and be injected with placenta-type stuff. I mean, really, if you have to try that hard. But people have got the money to do it, haven't they? Yeah, absolutely.
What's wrong with a bit of E45?
Well, exactly. Exactly. Or as my mum used to say, just drink water. It's the best thing you can do for your skin is just to keep drinking water.
What about night cream? Do ladies still put night cream on? Because my grandma always did that. She always went to bed and she always slapped on a lot of Ponds.
Yes, they used to, exactly. Ponds made their name practically on night cream and day cream and things like that. I think, nowadays you just moisturise, darling.
Oh, dear. I often wondered, how do you sleep with night cream
Well,
on?
exactly.
Because
Get a greasy pillow.
a greasy pillow, yeah.
Yeah.
And then a hairnet and all that. She had a hairnet on. And...
Yeah, and put your teeth in the...
yes, she did put her teeth in the jar, yeah. God love her.
Yeah, I know.
It's of the simpler days, somehow.
Yeah, actually, not necessarily better, actually, when you think of things like that.
No, oh, dear. How do we move from that to Donald Trump? I'm not really sure. I'm trying to find a segue.
Except it's all about image, isn't it? To him, it certainly is. And extraordinarily, they've released a mugshot overnight from his appearance in court yesterday.
Did you know that you can now buy a mug already with that mugshot on?
No.
They're on the internet already.
I suppose they would be. That's fast work, isn't it? Because it was only released at about 3 o'clock this morning.
Yeah.
But it is a police mugshot, as you can see. But it is, I think, one of the most glamorous I've ever seen. I'm not saying it's him at his best, but he looks made up. His hair is coiffed. He doesn't look like your ordinary mugshot. It's quite, it's almost as though he had a hair and makeup session before.
Yes, he's not shambolic in it.
No, nor looking distressed. He's looking very fierce.
Furious, I would say.
Yeah, well, actually, no doubt, because he's facing 13 felony counts in the state of Georgia regarding his efforts, allegedly, I suppose, to overturn the state's 2020 presidential election result.
Of course, he is not one to back down, so he came out of all of that telling broadcasters that he has every right to challenge an election that he felt was unfair.
Thank you very much for being here. I really believe this is a very sad day for America. This should never happen. If you challenge an election, you should be able to challenge an election. I thought the election was a rigged election, a stolen election, and I should have every right to do that. As you know, you have many people that you've been watching over the years do the same. What has taken place here is a travesty of justice. We did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong, and everybody knows it. I've never had such support, and that goes with the other ones, too. What they're doing is election interference. They're trying to interfere with an election. There's never been anything like it in our country before. This is their way of campaigning. And this is one instance, but you have 3 other instances. It's election interference. We did nothing wrong at all, and we have every right, every single right, to challenge an election that we think is dishonest, that we think it's very dishonest.
Well, joining us now is Scott Lucas, Professor Emeritus of International Studies at the University of Birmingham. Lovely to see you again. He's right, isn't he? He has the right, of course, anybody would, to challenge the result of the election, but maybe not in the way he did. And he's right as well in suggesting that he has never had such support.
Well, my first thought this morning was, what secret beauty regime has Donald Trump been using for that mugshot? Linking up with your previous item. My second thought was, as journalists and as analysts, it's going to be really important to keep our eyes on the facts, on the legal process, on the American system, and to be able to cut through the political spin and, frankly, the disinformation. So let me take up your 2 points, Ian. The first one on the legal side is that the indictments, both at the federal level and at the Georgia state level, have said that Donald Trump, like anybody, has the right to comment on an election. Trump has the right to say he thinks the election was rigged. The question is not that. The question is whether Donald Trump and his 18 co-defendants in Georgia took action knowing that they were issuing false statements. In other words, fraudulent statements, and then took action not just to complain about the election, but to overturn it. In other words, a plan carried out over 3 months to remove the legally selected, the legally elected representatives of Joe Biden and to parachute in Trump's fake electors to try to overturn the result in Georgia and other states. In other words, trying to cling on to the White House not by being elected, but through deception, or as Trump would put it, through interference. Your second question, and I think is even more important for us in the media and as analysts, and that is to stop going on about the polls. Because what happens here is that Trump sets off a self-reinforcing cycle. A lot of people know who he is. He does have a base who support him, but then he keeps saying, look at the polls and the legal process will only make me stronger. And by focusing only on him, we don't talk about the other candidates in the race. Only a day after the first Republican debate, we don't talk about the important issues facing America. We only talk about Trump. And if we only talk about Trump, he turns out the sun, and he's the only one that the media can find in the darkness.
Does any of this matter, Scott? In the sense, I mean, I know we've talked many times, and you say, you know, in terms of the legal side of it, you've got to look at the facts and not be put off by the spin and all the rest of it, which is absolutely valid. I totally agree with you. However, does any of it matter in the sense that even if he is convicted, this does seem to be playing in his favour, and actually it doesn't seem like it would in any way stop his ability to become the nominee or indeed to win the presidency?
Well, you know, again, a quick fact check to cut through the spin, and that is after the federal indictments early this month, and after the Georgia indictments, Donald Trump has slipped in the polls in the first Republican contest that take place next January and next February. But the more important point here is that the political process is separate from the legal system. Once you keep talking about the polls, and once you basically follow Trump's line, which is, if you prosecute me, it'll just make me stronger, you put your thumbs on the scales of justice. In other words, let the political process unfold as it may, but that does not give Donald Trump immunity from prosecution. In other words, even if he's elected president, he has to be held accountable before the law.
But look at what happened, what was it, yesterday or last night or the night before, when the Republican hopefuls all joined in the debate. It was on Fox News, I think, wasn't it? And Trump wasn't there. So you can argue there that the political process was happening without him. And yet he still managed to grab all the headlines. And he was watched on X, as it is now, Twitter. He was watched by some 200 million people. He still, even if the political process insists on going ahead without him, he still manages to be bigger than that.
Well, that 200 million figure is a bit suspect for reasons I can explain later. But you just reinforced my point, Anne. Turn off the lights, and there's only Trump to be followed in the darkness. So what happens? We've got 8 candidates trying to make their names, some of them with extensive political experience, like the former Vice President Mike Pence or the former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. They're trying to discuss important issues like abortion, like immigration, like the economy. So what does Donald Trump do? He sets himself up with his friend, Tucker Carlson, a man who was considered so extreme that he was let go by Fox TV. And then Trump says, it's me and Tucker. And what does Trump say? Trump says that the events of the Capitol attack on January 6, 2021, and these are his exact words, were a beautiful day, which involved people who loved America. So rather than us talking about the serious challenge to the American system and democracy, people ignore what's happening in Milwaukee and go to X or Twitter or whatever Elon Musk calls it these days, and just simply have this diet of misinformation, of insult, and indeed of threat. And the question at the end of the day is, look, at the end of the day, people are going to have to make their choices politically. But in terms of the legitimacy of the legal and political system, to always remember that Donald Trump is trying to set a narrative that is not exactly the day-to-day reality that we face in America or indeed in the UK.
Why do people believe him? And I'm not making myself popular with a lot of our viewers now, and I know it. But as someone who has spent his entire career, I mean, as Anne has as well, you know, talking to politicians, understanding how politics works, you can see through what Donald Trump is doing politically a lot of the time. You can't always take him seriously. I'd argue you can't take him seriously most of the time, really. And yet people absolutely swallow what he has to say. It's almost like a cult.
Well, you know, I wouldn't go that way, because I think you have to respect the fact that if you go back to 2015, 2016, even though Donald Trump was pretty much a reality TV star, even though he wasn't actually that successful as a businessman, what he did is he was tapping into an America where many people did not like Hillary Clinton, did not think that she should hold the office. Many people were still suffering from the effects of the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, and America had become polarized. It had become an us versus them society. And Trump steps in as the showman, or shall we say it, the snake oil salesman who says, I can make it all better. And by dealing with illusion, by dealing with spectacle, by dealing with his own ego and making it larger than life, he does draw people in, and he raises the stakes. Because what he says is if you ever don't believe it, if you ever don't buy the show, if you ever don't buy the snake oil, you're choosing dark forces. You're choosing the deep state over me. You're choosing the enemies over me. And people get entrenched in that because it's very hard. And you know this, that when people get entrenched in an opinion, it's hard to pull back from it because you lose all that investment you've made, which now with Trump goes back 8 years. So I can understand why people still side with him, given that a few of them I know quite closely, including my parents.
Oh,
it's interesting. Interesting. Look, Scott, as always, really good to see you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
And I mean, the problem with Trump is it's black and white for most people. It's black and white. I mean, I really try to be objective with what I do in this job, and it's why when he was president, and things like what happened, I keep saying it this morning, but what happened with North Korea, I thought was very interesting, and said at the time, nobody but Trump could have done that. It didn't actually result in anything, but nevertheless, it was a historic moment, and no one but him could have done it. So I try to be really objective, but as Scott says, there is also a lot of snake oil, and so with the same mind, I look at it and go, but a lot of what he says is nonsense.
Well, remember the bleach, drinking the... Oh, sorry, there's a flag.
Bleach.
The bleach, yes, during the... Yeah. Oh, the people shaking their head in disbelief at what he was saying. But it shows the power of fame, I think, nowadays. Celebrity, if you like. It annoys me equally that people start talking seriously about Meghan Markle running for president. You know, this is silly. You know, this is fame. This isn't serious politics. And as we heard there, as Scott said, there are really serious issues to be debated. And nobody is. They're trying to, but they get shouted down all the time.
And I do think there's a big argument to be had about having serious politicians in charge, whether it's over here or in the United States. The problem with that is, of course, I mean, Sunak's on the front of the Express. I mean, a lot of people were saying, well, Rishi's the grown-up in the room compared to Boris Johnson, who was very much a showman. But then Rishi's not really achieved a great deal, has he?
No.
Especially on these 5 pledges. I mean, that hasn't worked either.
It's almost as though you need both, don't you? You need to be famous, you need to be a celebrity or have a massive presence, but also be a serious politician. And that may be a very difficult combination to find.
See, Obama did it.
Well, a lot of people don't like Obama.
No, well, they don't in the States. No, not popular in the States.
And they feel he didn't actually achieve very much.
But popular everywhere else.
Yeah.
When you look at footage of Obama back in the day, and there is a comfort in he seems to be, addressing things
grown up in the room
in a grown-up way.
Who's your favourite world statesman, alive or dead? Actually, and why? Because it's a fascinating one. I know there'll be people who say Churchill, but there were a lot of detractors about Churchill, and increasingly so now as we revise everything. So, let us go. gbviews@gbnews.com. Let us know who your favourite statesman or woman is or was. It'd be really interesting to hear, and why, please.
Now, The energy regulator Ofgem has this morning announced that the next price cap, that covers October to December, is £1,923. That's for the average household in England, Wales and Scotland. And it's dropping from just over £2,000 in July.
Now, analysts are also saying that, therefore, a typical annual bill could be £150 cheaper this winter. That's the annual bill. But, of course, we have reduced help from the government and higher fixed costs for many. So are we actually going to see much difference in what we do pay?
Let's talk to Angela Knight, former Chief Executive at Energy UK. Good to see you this morning. Do you think we will actually notice any difference in our pockets?
Well, I think so, because it's not just about what's going to happen over the next 2 to 3 months. Looking ahead, the prices are stabilised on the wholesale market. So actually what we're looking at is, yes, paying more than we were before we had the crisis, before Putin invaded Ukraine, and that sent all the world gas prices wild. So we're not going back to those days, but we're also not going back to last winter where prices were shooting all over the place. We're looking at a situation now in which the gas and electricity prices are far more stable, and they're far more stable across this winter. So it is good news in that respect.
But the headline, as we see it there on the screen, the Ofgem's cap drops to 1,923. That sort of, on the face of it, sounds good. Does that mean we are therefore probably very unlikely to get any help from the government this winter to pay our bills?
Well, you'll get help if you fall into some of the categories. You still get, there's warm home discount, which is available to many people who are on benefits. There's the assistance to old age pensioners. It's there as well. And to disabled people. What it means is that people like you, Anne, and me, we're not going to get any help. You know, you can't forever take money out of one pocket and put it into another, you know, out of some sort of general taxpayer's pot and pass it back to ourselves. So poor end of societies, those in trouble, yes, they get assistance. And by the way, I should say, there's also far more compulsion now on energy companies to help those who get into difficulty. But the mainstream of us who are earning reasonably, we will have to pay more for our gas and electricity from now on. But as I say, not as much as we were paying across the winter, because even with the help last winter, prices were higher than this.
OK. Angela Knight, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. No. Go on.
Yeah, hopefully I'll get a bit of help.
Well,
it's just as well, isn't it? Because
you get your old
I've
age.
had to turn the heating on.
Yes, well, yeah.
Because it's blooming cold at the moment, and it's August.
I sort of think, well, you know, you paid into the system long enough.
I know.
It's quite right. You get your help as a.
Don't say it. Don't say the word.
No. As an elder statesman of our society.
That's it, yes. This is a veteran broadcaster, somebody called me. Veteran, oh gosh.
I sort of think when you reach an age, you know, if you've paid in and all the rest of it,
I think
have it back.
Oh yeah, I really do think if you paid in, if you've done your bit, why shouldn't you? Yeah.
Quite right.
There are other ways you can contribute to society, aren't there?
Yes, there are.
8:20. Now, members of Parliament who lose their seat at the next election are going to receive double the financial support that they did before.
Yeah, so if you fight and lose your seat, MPs currently get 2 months' wages. But the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority, IPSA, the one that also keeps recommending they get pay rises, that's cynically written, has ruled that they should now get 4 months' wages in future. And 4 months, I mean, it's redundancy pay, basically.
It's a golden handshake in a way, isn't it? In any other industry, it's almost unthinkable, isn't it? Shall we talk to our political editor, Christopher Hope? He'll know. Hello there, Christopher. Hi. I think a lot of people watching might be quite surprised to find that MPs who are leaving Parliament or even standing down get some sort of a golden handshake.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to correct Stephen. It's even worse than Stephen says. This is not a redundancy payment, Stephen. They get that already. That's double statutory payment. So an MP serving 5 years gets 5,000 or 6,000 quid. That's their redundancy. This is called a winding up payment to wind up their offices. Previously, they got 8 weeks' pay to wrap up everything and tie up all the loose ends in the office. Now it's going to be 16 weeks. That's an extra £8,600 to tie up all the loose ends in the office. Now, there won't be a vote on this. There was a consultation earlier this year, and IPSA, this body which runs all the pay for the people behind me, MPs, has said it's going to go through. It really goes back to, we had lots of surprising elections in 2017, 2019. This election next year is the first one we've known is coming for a while. IPSA tell me the reason why they're doing this is because the government has dropped the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, which meant there were elections every 5 years. But I think some people pondering about the kind of only small reduction there in the energy price cap might be wondering how much money is going towards MPs.
Yeah, but I mean, I know it's very easy to be cynical about this, but isn't it right that MPs and the people working in their offices, it's not just about the MPs, you know, that these matters are wound up in a proper way? I mean, it's all about the people they represent, isn't it?
Yeah. But if you know an election's coming next year and it's coming in May, June or October, November, how much time do you need? They've already got 2 months for it. Now they're going to get 4 months to do it after the election. But if you know it's coming, you know what's happening, you can start taking measures earlier than that, some might argue. Certainly the Taxpayers Alliance, this body is really think it's a kick in the teeth for people suffering with the cost of living crisis. This is our money, taxpayers' money going towards it. There won't be a vote, it's going to happen. It may be a debate for GB News viewers today.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's something that people will be quite... Actually, Christopher, before you go, can I just ask you, I'm sure a few years ago, MPs used to get far more than this. Didn't they used to get golden handshakes of something like 50 grand?
Yeah, well, and it depends on service, so it can go up and down. The truth is they now get on the redundancy payment, which is separate to this, they get twice the statutory level. They get the level that civil servants get. So an MP serving for 5 years gets around 6 grand. So an MP serving for 20 years might get 4 times that figure. So they get redundancy. They're now going to have longer to wrap up loose ends in their office. But as I say, because the election we know when it's going to be, we're back to the normal idea of elections every 5 years. Some might question whether this increase is necessary.
OK, Christopher, thanks very much indeed. Of course, this winding up doesn't apply to people who've already said they're not going to stand at the next election.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
Well, one of the newspapers has got it wrong then, because I read something about it. Even if they've decided to stand down now.
No,
that wouldn't be right.
No, it's only those people who stand and lose.
And as you said, I mean, that's where politics can be a very cruel thing. You can be doing very well, you can be hopeful, you've been campaigning hard, and then suddenly you're unemployed.
That's it, you're
suddenly.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so are your staff.
Yes, and that's probably the most important thing. All of the other people who've been faithfully working for you probably for the last 5 years or more suddenly lose their jobs just like that too.
Yeah.
That must be very hard.
So I know it's very easy to get our knickers in a twist over this, or whenever it's MPs. I know people do, but I sort of think it's got to be handled right. I mean, I'm not saying it's right to double the time, because I just don't know how long it takes to wind these things up. Don't know, never done it. But we've got to view it in a different way. I mean, say it's down to IPSA, not down to the MPs.
Yeah, they always hide behind that, though, don't they?
Well, yeah, but it's not. I mean, it's like with their pay. They don't have any say on it at all.
I know.
And to be fair, they spend most of their time fighting with IPSA MPs, because that's how they have to have all their expenses done through now after all that scandal.
Well, that's right. I think they still bear the weight of that expenses scandal, don't they? They have to be seen to be fair, which is why IPSA has to do it.
Yeah.
But do you remember the expenses scandal? My goodness.
Yes, not a lot.
Caused a ruckus, didn't it?
Yes.
Shall we have a look at the weather?
I think we better head.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Good morning. A case of dodging the downpours today and tomorrow. The long weekends will stay on the cool side, but it should get a little drier as the weekend goes on. Many of us starting a little chilly out there this morning, but with some decent spells of sunshine. Clouds going to bubble up pretty rapidly through the morning, and then we'll see a scattering of showers developing. I suspect parts of eastern England will stay dry, and the showers fairly well scattered elsewhere, so some sunshine coming through. The main exception to that will be northern Scotland, where it stays wet and fairly windy as well. Always on the cool side, a fresher feel compared to yesterday across East Anglia and the southeast.
Temperatures high teens at best for many. Still a few heavy showers around this evening, creating a bit of spray and surface water on the roads, staying fairly wet overnight across western Scotland and fairly windy here as well. And that'll lead into another showery day tomorrow. Again, temperatures dipping down into single figures in rural spots, most towns and cities staying in double figures tonight. On to the weekend then, a bank holiday for many of us, of course. There will be some sunshine around on Saturday, but there will also be a lot of showers tomorrow, some heavy ones likely over northern England, parts of Wales, but developing more widely again through the day. So you'll be lucky to stay completely dry tomorrow. The showers, where they do occur, could be pretty heavy and even thundery. And again, on the cool side for the time of year, temperatures high teens at best, but it should get a bit drier as we go through the weekend.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
We love stories now.
You are some lovely softies watching, aren't you? We've been talking about love and marriage through most of the programme today.
Divorce, really.
And, well, yes, it started about talking about divorce. Leslie says, my husband Phil and me met at school when I was 14, and I can remember telling friends I was going to marry him when I first saw him. 62 years old now, and today, 44 years ago, I married my sweetheart. I can honestly say I love him more today than back then, which I didn't know was possible.
There you go, you see. And Carol says, I met my husband in an unromantic explosive factory in 1991. I told a colleague I'm going to marry him, moved in after 2 weeks, got married in 1992, had our son in 1994, blissfully happy. It's our 31st anniversary next month, and it's his birthday today. So happy birthday to my wonderful husband, Tom.
Happy birthday,
I love
Tom.
that. Fabulous.
Why get married? That's what you were asking earlier.
Yeah.
People get married for the wrong reasons. Barry in St Neots says, my wife and I got married a few months after we met at university. It cost £12.75, but it meant that I could qualify for a grant of university fees of £125 per term. It's now... So it was a financial transaction. It's now 47 years later, and my wife says she's paid for the grant many times over.
I bet she has. Barry, Illuminate, you better take her breakfast in bed this morning. Get your thoughts coming through gbviews@gbnews.com. We've got all the sport heading away in just a moment with Paul Coyte.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
And action.
Sergeant Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News. Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 8:33. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Now, the latest Home Office figures showed that the backlog of asylum claims in the UK has hit a record high. You may not have needed to be told that.
No,
feel it, don't we?
you certainly do. Well, now that figure is 175,000 people waiting for an initial decision on an asylum application. That was at the end of June this year, and that's up 44% compared to last year.
Yeah, meanwhile, you get front pages this morning like this on the Daily Express. The Prime Minister says the vast £4 billion spend on asylum is unacceptable, and he has said there's only one way of dealing with that, and that's to stop the boats in the first place.
Well, perhaps that's a fair point. Let's see what the Shadow Minister for the Cabinet Office, Baroness Chapman, makes of it all. Good to see you this morning. I mean, the Prime Minister's got a point, hasn't he? You know, stopping the boats in the first place will stop some of this, but clearly we've still got to start working pretty pronto on the backlog.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's fine the Prime Minister saying that, if only he was in a position to do something about it, isn't it? I mean, it's extraordinary, the Prime Minister making statements like that when they've been running the show for 13 years, and now they say it's unacceptable. Well, it is unacceptable. And you know how many, you talk about the backlog, but do you know how many of the 45,000 people who crossed in a small boat last year, how many of their claims have been processed? It's 1%. You know, this system is an absolute crisis. And it's been getting worse year on year since 2010. And now, you know, it's a big incentive for people getting in these boats, knowing that they're going to get here and their claim is not even going to be looked at potentially for years. And the people traffickers know this, they tell them this, and it's a big driver for people coming here. So, you know, I'm afraid that Rishi Sunak can make these statements and he goes in for these sort of gimmicky so-called solutions, but the only way you're going to deal with this is to get that backlog down, get the decisions made like we used to, and, you know, get people dealt with and stop spending £6 million every day on hotels for people.
Yeah, I mean, this headline, this £4 billion spent on asylum is almost double what it was last year. I mean, you hope to get into office after the next election. You'll not have any money to spend on sorting this crisis anyway, will you?
Well, you shouldn't be spending this much money. You shouldn't have let it get to this. But given that they have, you know, Labour has put forward a plan for dealing with it, and it involves dealing with it, you know, with things like the National Crime Agency having a specific unit dedicated to dealing with this and getting that backlog sorted out. You know, it's indefensible what's happened. And just recently, as part of the immigration bill, we tried to say to the government, look, you need a dedicated unit focused on this crime. You know, this is gangsters getting people across the channel, you know, charging them thousands of pounds to get here, putting their lives in danger, and then they're stuck here in our system. You know, you need people who are good at dealing with criminals, because that is what they are, to focus on this. And the government didn't go for that idea. I honestly don't know why, because from our point of view, that is the only way you're going to deal with this problem.
Yeah, well, look, that sounds sensible. What I can't get my head round. And yeah, I'm talking just as a punter here, right, Jenny, which is, you know, we've got a huge backlog, and you know, Labour says, well, we'll sort that out. The government would have done that, would have sorted it out if it was that simple, wouldn't it? You know, stopping the boats isn't proving to be simple. If it was dead easy, it would have been done, surely. So why do you think you can do it when the government can't?
So nobody should be saying this is simple. I don't think anybody should be saying that. The only people who've been saying that is the government, because they've said, look, back this bill, or let's go for the Rwanda policy, that's the solution. Well, guess what? It isn't, because they're reaching for simple solutions to what is actually quite a complex problem. And the only way you deal with it is through the plan that we've put forward, which involves enforcement, involves dealing with the French, making sure that you've got proper arrangements there to prevent people coming in the first place. You've got the National Crime Agency with a specific focus on this and expertise together in a single unit that can actually deal with this competently. That's what we want to see. And you've got to get the backlog down, because as long as people think that as long as they can get here, they get a few years before anything will be decided about their case, that's a massive incentive. That's what's driving people to take this horrific risk. If they knew that the decision would be made promptly and then action would be taken to return them, or as is appropriate in each individual case, then we think that you would see numbers dwindling. You don't get that through this Rwanda scheme, which the government is spending millions of pounds on, because actually people don't believe in it. They're not going to believe the British government over the people traffickers who are lying to them and exploiting them. And the Rwanda scheme is not going to work as a deterrent. What will work as a deterrent is getting down that backlog so that people don't get that amount of time here in the UK before a decision is made.
OK. Jenny Chapman, we've got to leave it there, but really good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate it. Cutting it slightly short.
Because
we've got Andrew Bowie on the line, who's limited for time. He's Minister for Nuclear and Networks at the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, which is quite a mouthful, as always, but it's good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Look, I know there's lots to talk to you about, but as we were just talking to Jenny Chapman about immigration, I've got to ask you, I mean, the PM can say what he likes about bringing all this down. To see the numbers up by 44%, those people, waiting any sort of process when they get into this country, I mean, that is absolutely shocking, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is. And we are determined to bring the asylum backlog down, which is the reason why the Prime Minister has made stopping the boats one of his top 5 priorities. Crossings across the Channel are actually down 15% year on year, but that in no way detracts from the fact that we have got an asylum backlog. We need to tackle it, and that's why we need to stop the votes, prevent people coming into this country illegally. We await to hear the judgment from the Supreme Court on our Rwanda scheme. We very much hope that they will find in the government's favour, because that we do believe will act as a deterrent for people to cross into the country illegally, so we can tackle the vicious and pernicious trade in human life. We have got schemes and agreements with various third countries. For example, we've got an agreement with Albania that has seen Albanian migrants coming into this country reduced by some 90%. So we are taking action. And actually, in comparison to what the Labour Party are proposing, they don't even seem to have any plan whatsoever. I was amazed to hear Jenny Chapman say that the deterrent would be resolving the asylum backlog. No, the deterrent will be the Rwanda scheme. We'll be putting people off coming to this country illegally to begin with, so that we can get on and deal with the backlog. That's one of these government's top priorities, and that's what we're determined to do.
Meanwhile, while people from the media interview migrants making the journey across the Channel, they say nothing will put them off. Nothing. And meanwhile, our asylum bill has doubled to $4 billion. I mean, this can't go on, can it?
No, it can't go on. You're absolutely right. It can't go on. And nobody's been clearer on this than the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary. This is why we need the Rwanda scheme to get up and running. This is why we need to do more with our French counterparts across the Channel to ensure that less people are getting on those boats. That's why we need to crack open the trade in human life, which is going on from North Africa and the Middle East all the way through into this country. That's why we are talking to partners in that region as we speak. And it's why we absolutely must stop the boats. The Prime Minister determined we're going to do that. I'm determined to support him in any way I can to ensure we get this under control, because the situation cannot continue as it is.
But the problem is, Mr. Bowie, that we keep saying, you keep saying, well, yes, we need to crack down on that. We need to stop the boats. We need to get the Rwanda scheme up and running. But none of that is happening. Now, that might not be the government's fault. There's all these other legal processes and everything else in place. But at the minute, you can say it all you like. It isn't actually happening, and that's why people are getting frustrated.
I understand people are frustrated. Nobody's more frustrated than us. We want to see the asylum backlog dealt with. We want to see the trade in human life on the channel broken. We don't want to see people crossing into this country illegally. Look, crossings across the channel are down 15% year on year, but that's nowhere near where we actually want it to be. We do await the result in the Rwanda case with the Supreme Court. As soon as we get the result from that, and we do hope that it finds in the government's favour, we will start deporting illegal migrants to Rwanda. We do believe this will act as the deterrent necessary to prevent people from crossing into this country, and so we can get on and crack those people smuggling gangs and crack the vicious trade in human life that is smuggling people into this country, and then can get on and deal with the backlog. All of this is incumbent on our getting that judgment from the Supreme Court on Rwanda. We very much hope that they will find in the government's favour so we can get on and deal with the rest of it. By the way, this is in far and away more of a detailed plan than anything that the Labour Party have been able to present on this, who so far have come up with absolutely nothing to say on how they would actually deal with the people smuggling gangs and people crossing the channel.
Are we getting value for money from the French to stop the boats?
That's a very good question. We are working very closely with the French government. This is a very, very difficult situation. Every country in Europe is dealing in some way with increased migration onto the continent. We've seen the situation in Greece and Italy, through France and on the French coastline. I do think that, of course, the French government could be doing more, but we are determined to support them in that. That's why we have recently achieved a further deal within the Prime Minister just in the last few months, and we would like them to go further. We need to, as I say, break the smuggling gang, stop people getting onto boats in the first place. Everything we're doing is determined to achieve that.
A quick thought, and I know you pushed for time, on the energy price cap. So the figures are going down. That's positive news. But, of course, as a result of all of that, government support is being withdrawn. There's going to be people saying, it's still expensive, I'm still going to need help. Where is the government in providing help for those people who really need it?
Look, this government stepped up and supported the British people last year by paying half of everybody's energy bills. That cost the government £40 billion, but it was £40 billion well spent, in my mind, because the British people needed the support last winter. We're seeing energy prices coming down, £580 down from their peak, which is an incredibly positive place to be. However, of course, there will be people out there who will be looking at the average energy bill thinking that it's unaffordable, and that's why this government will be supporting the most vulnerable, pensioners and those who cannot afford to heat their homes, as we always have done, and we will continue to do so through this winter.
OK, Andrew Bowie, really good to see you. Thank you very much, Steve, for joining us from glorious Aberdeen. It's just
Thank you very much.
Place.
It looks
good to see you. Yeah. I love Aberdeen. I love it.
Never been.
The Granite City, they call it.
Yeah.
It's fabulous.
What were you doing up there?
My brother used to work there.
All right.
A long time ago now, so I went up there to visit and things. Absolutely fabulous. If you're up there, brilliant stuff.
Very good morning to you. In a couple of moments, we're going to talk sport, including Mary Queen of Shirts. Nike have U-turned over the World Cup goalkeeper's shirt.
Yeah, quite right too.
Quite right, about time.
Yeah, we'll get the latest from Paul.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Should we talk sport?
Yes, let's talk sport.
I think we better, because this fella's been sat here for 10 minutes.
Yes.
Who are you?
I've been enjoying everything else.
Oh, lovely.
I know it seems like 10 minutes. I've actually been here for an hour and a half.
Ah, have you?
So, yeah.
Excellent.
So all the groans and noises and cheers, everything, that was
Oh, that was you?
me.
Excellent.
So I was just trying to, cheer you on.
Yes, I like you sitting there having a bit of applause.
Well, I think it needs it.
We like a bit of cheering on.
Yeah. It's almost like a live audience that you've got with you. It's almost like a live show as well as big on TV. Anyway.
Tell me about Mary Queen of Tops or Mary Queen of
Oh, you want to start with Mary Earps, do you? You want to go straight in with Earps?
Yes.
Well, Mary Earps, of course, goalkeeper for England. There was all this problem, the fact that you could buy the Lioness's shirts.
But not hers.
Not the Nike one. So...
And yet she was the star.
She was the star, but the thing is, Nike probably didn't realise that beforehand. But also, you've got to think maybe on their point of view, because at first I'm thinking, well, it makes sense. If you're going to sell shirts, obviously you're going to sell more outfield shirts, because then you can put whatever name on there. And they're thinking, well, who's actually going to buy the goalkeeper shirt? Whereas for her team, Manchester United, they'd sold out. But how many, I don't know. So Nike had come back and said words to the effect of, yes, we understand, and, and there's reasons for it. And it was just a load of mumbo-jumbo. But basically, get to now, and her being the hero, or the heroine of the situation, they are now going to release a limited amount of goalkeeper shirts, not just for England, but for other countries as well.
It's good of them, isn't it?
A bit late now, though, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the fact they're saying, we'll release a limited amount, just sort of sounds as though they're still not convinced.
I don't think they are convinced.
There's a nation of little girls who want that shirt.
There are.
It might be a limited amount of 50,000.
Yes,
something like that.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe we'll test it and see, test the water and see how it goes. But anyway, so you will find. I know that's what you're after.
I'll be able to get.
But you will be able to get your Earps shirt. So, we will be able to sort the Earps shirt. I want to talk athletics though, because
yes, please.
I love the athletics, and I don't know if you remember, but it almost seems now that athletics has lost its way a little with so much sport on TV. Back in the day, it used to be the fact that it always used to be on the BBC on a Friday evening, and because it's all about rights, and then you wouldn't have so much live football, so people would very much invest in athletics, whereas now, unfortunately, and I love it as much as ever, seems to be a little on the slide. They've got the World Championships, which is on at the moment, which is over in Budapest, and it's been very good. It's been really good. And Matt Hudson-Smith yesterday, who's our 400-metre runner, he got a silver. Now, he'd run the fastest time. There he is, look, very happy. He's been through a lot, though. I mean, he almost quit the sport a year ago, had some bad mental health issues, injuries in there as well. But he got silver yesterday, which goes with Josh Kerr's gold in the 1,500 metres the night before. Now, Josh Kerr, see, the old days of Cram and Ovitt and co, it seems like those days are coming back with the 1,500. Now, Josh Kerr, who's a Scotsman, him and Jake Whiteman, who won... Now, look at this picture. I love this picture. That's Josh there, back in his boy running days.
Yeah, we got a picture of two sort of 15-year-olds in their athletics outfits.
And that's Jake Whiteman on the right, who won the world title last year in the 1,500, and then next to him, there's Josh Kerr. And it just shows that they came up together and they've both won gold.
Yeah, that's really nice.
And I really do like that.
We're down to 30 seconds, Paul.
OK.
Can we talk about buggies colliding?
So we're more of a 100-metre than a 10,000-metre. Buggies, 200 metres. We've got the final of that in the men's and the women's, which is tonight. But last night, before the semi-final, two buggies, have a look at this. There's two buggies here, collided. Now, look very closely, and this is just outside the stadium. There's two buggies.
Oh.
Now, there's a crash. Oh. Both of those have the 200-metre runners that were involved in the semi-final. How on earth that happens, I don't know. One of them was Andrew Hudson from Jamaica, who ended up with a shard of glass in his eye, who then ran terribly, and then they've decided, OK, well, you came fifth, but we will now let you run in the final. Because you couldn't see where he was going.
He was going.
Yeah.
No, quite right.
As neither could the driver, by the look of things.
Well, he was saying, oh, look at that lovely stadium.
Yeah, I know, look at that.
Straight
Bang, yeah, there's a lot of talent in that bus.
That is it. Get out.
OK, thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. Let's have a look at the weather for you.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Good morning. A case of dodging the downpours today and tomorrow. The long weekends will stay on the cool side, but it should get a little drier as the weekend goes on. Many of us starting a little chilly out there this morning, but with some decent spells of sunshine. Clouds going to bubble up pretty rapidly through the morning, and then we'll see a scattering of showers developing. I suspect parts of eastern England will stay dry, and the showers fairly well scattered elsewhere, so some sunshine coming through. The main exception to that will be northern Scotland, where it stays wet and fairly windy as well. Always on the cool side, a fresher feel compared to yesterday across East Anglia and the southeast. Temperatures high teens at best for many. Still a few heavy showers around this evening, creating a bit of spray and surface water on the roads, staying fairly wet overnight across western Scotland, and fairly windy here as well. And that'll lead into another showery day tomorrow. Again, temperatures dipping down into single figures in rural spots, most towns and cities staying in double figures tonight. On to the weekend then. A bank holiday for many of us, of course. There will be some sunshine around on Saturday, but there will also be a lot of showers tomorrow. Some heavy ones likely over northern England, parts of Wales, but developing more widely again through the day. So you'll be lucky to stay completely dry tomorrow. The showers, where they do occur, could be pretty heavy and even thundery. And again, on the cool side for the time of year, temperatures high teens at best, but it should get a bit drier as we go through the weekend.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Who's your favourite statesman, we asked. Jill says Ronald Reagan. Presence, gravitas and effectiveness.
Dave says simple. Thatcher got things done and both respected and feared by other world leaders.
Christine says from a very short list, Mikhail Gorbachev.
But
Interesting.
Margaret Thatcher's with.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant, the big green, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Morning to you. It's 9 o'clock on Friday, the 25th of August. Today, Donald Trump's mugshot is dominating the news. It's the first ever of a former president after he was charged with trying to overturn the election results in 2020.
And we'll be talking energy prices. They should drop this winter. Ofgem have announced the new energy price cap.
We've got showbiz news heading your way, including Jennifer Aniston's revelations about her romantic life.
And, of course, the latest weather from Alex.
A cool start out there today with some sunshine. We are going to see a few showers developing, and then we're into the weekend. A bank holiday for many of us. I'll have a full forecast coming up later.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Interesting. On this list, we asked for your favourite statesman, and Ronald Reagan's doing well.
Yes, very well.
Jeff says he was a great listener and surrounded himself with good people.
He was also a great speaker.
He was a great speaker, very funny.
Mm.
I think that's what we're lacking in today's politicians. People who listen. They talk more than they listen now.
Yeah, and actually...
What did they say? You've got 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Oh, yeah.
They use it in that way.
Yeah, but they also talk in captions and slogans and sound bites, don't they? You get the feeling, and we've said this before, it's only when they retire, stand down, and then you can call them an elder statesman or something, then you actually get them to say what they really think.
Yeah.
Julie says, my favourite statesperson, Margaret Thatcher, because she was no nonsense. She stood up to people and looked and behaved like a head of state. She wasn't bothered about being a celebrity like they are now.
That's true. She wasn't.
No, you wouldn't call her a celebrity at all, would you?
No.
Although she quite liked the camera, you know.
No, she could work around. And I saw her a few times because she was friends of a friend of mine. So long after she was out of office, and met her at dinner parties and things, and she was, even when things were starting to go, it was fascinating to talk to her and still work a room.
First time I met her was at one of those reception type things, and she said, and I was introduced as somebody from Breakfast Television. She said, "Oh, Breakfast Television. I've never seen it, but I'm on it a lot."
Fair point.
Yeah, really.
No, she was very nice. Interesting, just a quick one. Jim says Farage by a country mile.
Yes.
He's not
Very
actually
nice.
a statesman.
Well,
Is he?
No, he is. Isn't he?
No, I don't
When
think
does
so.
somebody become a statesman?
I think
they
they have to be an elected politician in this country.
I don't think they do.
I don't know,
Isn't being a statesman somebody who just commands, I don't know, authority?
He says far more intelligent, patriotic, and takes on powerful forces single-handedly. But look, a lot of people disagree with Nigel. The nice thing about Nigel is, as a person, when you get to know him, is you can disagree with him and he doesn't mind. He'll just discuss the issues with you.
All right, I've just dictionaried it.
All right.
A statesman is a skilled, experienced and respected political leader or figure.
All right, well, he'd fall into
So I think
that.
we'll have to ask him.
We'll ask him.
Are you a statesman?
But no, you can disagree with Nigel and that's fine.
And he knows exactly how to deal with it too, doesn't he?
But that's nice.
Yeah.
That's what I like. Don't like agreeing with everybody.
Friend of Donald Trump.
Well, he is a friend of Donald Trump.
He's a friend, yeah. Who is in the news, of course, because overnight they've released the mugshot of him. He voluntarily surrendered yesterday at the Fulton County Jail in Atlanta.
Facing 13 felony counts regarding efforts to overturn Georgia's 2020 presidential election result.
Well, never one to back down, of course. He came out fighting, telling broadcasters that he has every right to challenge an election he feels is unfair.
Thank you very much for being here. I really believe this is a very sad day for America. This should never happen. If you challenge an election, you should be able to challenge an election. I thought the election was a rigged election, a stolen election, and I should have every right to do that. As you know, you have many people that you've been watching over the years do the same. What has taken place here is a travesty of justice. We did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong, and everybody knows it. I've never had such support, and that goes with the other ones, too. What they're doing is election interference. They're trying to interfere with an election. There's never been anything like it in our country before. This is their way of campaigning. And this is one instance, but you have three other instances. It's election interference. We did nothing wrong at all, and we have every right, every single right, to challenge an election that we think is dishonest, that we think it's very dishonest.
Joining us now from Nashville is Steve Gill, former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administrations. A very good morning to you. Obviously, Donald Trump putting a very brave face on what's just happened to him, but they've released a picture of his face as a mugshot. Is that something of which America should be deeply ashamed?
You know, it's interesting. You can already get a T-shirt with the mugshot emblazoned across it from the Trump team. For about 20 pounds. Guys, if you'll text me your sizes, I can hook you up. I think it's interesting when you look at this mugshot, and you know there had to be some consideration. Do you smile? Do you kind of have this defiant, I'm going to fight this look? And obviously they went with the I'm going to fight this look, and I think it's a good look. I think that this is going to make millions for the Trump campaign and for those that oppose Trump. Again, there's already anti-Trump T-shirts with the mugshot on it, portraying it as losers. So both sides are going to benefit from this mugshot.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it keeps him well and truly in the spotlight, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think, as I've said, my concern is that when you see every time an indictment come, every time there's another move in these cases, his poll numbers go up. We'll see if that's the case with the release of this mugshot and this circus that occurred down in Georgia yesterday. I'm afraid that American politicians may misread this and think they should go rob a convenience store, get their own criminal indictment so it'll move their poll numbers up. But Donald Trump is a once-in-a-millennia politician. He has defied gravity time and time again when things occur that would kill the career of a normal politician, and he's thrived and done better. So I don't think anybody should take any lessons that committing crimes will help you in politics moving forward.
He is now facing these 13 very serious indictments, charges. How quickly could the process work?
I think it's going to be slow. And keep in mind that you've got a Democrat DA, district attorney in Atlanta, Georgia, a Democrat elected judge. So this is a very partisan situation in a county that overwhelmingly rejected Donald Trump in the presidential election, even though the rest of that state came very close to electing him. I think there was about an 18,300 vote margin in the entire state of Georgia that he is challenging and trying to point out that there are a lot of questions in the way that ballots were handled, ballots were counted. You had this story that election day, as the ballots were being counted, that a water pipe had burst at the counting center in Fulton County, Georgia, and therefore the Republican observers of the vote count were sent home while Democrats kept counting ballots in secret. So there's a lot of questions about this, and the real question in this case is, was there a legitimate question about the validity of the election? And did Donald Trump believe there were serious questions? Because you've got to prove that he was intending to overturn the election without any basis, any proof whatsoever. And that's going to be heard in this case. Is there proof? And I think there's going to be plenty of proof to at least raise the question.
The problem is with all, I mean, like the water pipe issue that you raised, I mean, it becomes the stuff of conspiracy theory, doesn't it? Which, I mean, and it's almost impossible to argue against a conspiracy theorist.
Except that the facts in this case are that there was an overflowing toilet about 12 hours before they started counting the ballots. There actually wasn't a water pipe that burst. So some of the excuses don't add up. And when you look at the way they handle the ballot count in Georgia, you have a signature verification. When somebody signs the ballot that they send in, they are supposed to compare the signature that's on file with the signature on the paper ballot that somebody collected or mailed in. In Georgia, normally you have about 3% of those ballots thrown out because the signatures don't seem to match up. In 2020, 0.3% of ballots were thrown out, essentially zero, which I think raises the concern. And then again, Trump can raise, I believe that it was stolen because the numbers don't add up.
Fascinating. We'll leave it there because we're going to be talking about it for at least another year and a half, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Goodness only knows. And we'll be in touch about the T-shirts.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Steve. I don't know if I'd want to wear one.
No, I wouldn't want to wear one, but I can see why they'd be popular.
Yeah. Maybe we should get a couple of mugs.
They'll raise a fortune, won't they?
They will make a fortune.
With mugs and everything.
Yeah, there you go.
Everything's an opportunity.
It's all about the money. Talking of money, energy regulator Ofgem's announced the new price cap for us. This stretches for the last quarter of the year, October to December, and it is under £2,000, which is a sigh of relief for all round, I think. £1,923 for the average household in Wales and Scotland. It was just over £2,000 back in July.
And they're saying that a typical annual bill could be £150 cheaper this winter, but then you might not get the government help we did last time, and there'll be higher fixed costs for many. So will we actually see much difference in what we actually pay?
Let's talk to our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, who's here. I mean, there's various questions with this, Liam. I mean, there's one, how it affects us and what we're paying, but also how it affects the government now that they're not chipping in substantial amounts as well.
It really is quite complicated. As everybody, I mean, we sit at our kitchen tables staring at these electricity bills, trying to understand them. I mean, yeah, I'm the economics and business editor of GB News. I have trouble understanding
I'm glad to hear that.
My gas and electricity bill. It's almost as if it's designed to be complicated and they're taking money from you and keeping it, and when do I get that money back, etc., etc. Let's have a look at some of the details. So Ofgem, which is the energy regulator, they have announced a new price cap this morning. It's set to fall from £2,074 a year combined gas and electricity bill to £1,923 from October to December. But as you rightly say, Anne, that blanket £400 per household subsidy that we've been getting, it's been taken automatically off your bills. That's now gone. And Ofgem has also said that it's going to allow these energy companies to increase their standing charges. And that's a bit unfair because standing charges apply however much energy you use. So if you're a pensioner couple and you're trying to use less energy this winter, you're skimping on your heating, you're not cooking very much, that standing charge is still going to be the same, and that's going to go up. Ofgem's allowing that so the energy companies can try and recoup some money.
But, I mean, looking at that then, it looks like certainly some people
are going to pay more.
Well, don't shoot the messenger, but that's exactly right. So there's a think tank called the Resolution Foundation. They are broadly a centre-left think tank, but they're respectable. They don't make things up. And they came out with a report yesterday, which I talked about here on GB News, and I'll mention it again. So we've got another graphic about that. So the Resolution Foundation are saying when you allow for higher standing charges and the fact that the 400 quid subsidy is gone, they reckon 7.2 million homes, about a third of the homes in England, are going to end up with higher bills this winter, with the average standing charge, Ofgem's confirmed this morning, rising from about £250 to £300 a year. On top of that, we've also seen oil prices go up in the last few months. They're up 20% since late June. If you filled up your car or van lately, you'll have seen that in petrol and diesel prices, Stephen. And then also we've got wholesale gas prices going up. They're up 50% since mid-July. Now, that may not mean too much. They're really, really volatile. But look, there's still lots of geopolitical stuff going on. We're still talking lots about Putin and Ukraine. Energy markets are still volatile. And I'd really like to be able to say that it's going to be better this winter, and people are sort of assuming it will be. But last winter was quite mild. This winter, the long-range forecasts look as if it's going to be colder. And listen to this. This is from Jonathan Brearley. He's the chief exec of Ofcom. He said this morning, it's welcome that the price cap continues to fall, but I can't offer any certainty that things will ease this winter. And Gillian Cooper, who's the head of energy policy at the Excellent Citizens Advice Bureau, so a fantastic authoritative source, increasing numbers of people we see are in a negative budget. They simply don't have enough money coming in. Our data suggests it will be as bad, if not worse, than last winter. No wonder that Citizens Advice are calling for government to step in quickly with more targeted support.
But they're not likely to, are they?
Well,
yeah, it has to be targeted, doesn't it?
It will be. It will almost certainly be targeted. I don't think we're going to go backhand to sort of across-the-board blanket support for the likes of you and me with huge respect. I think there will be more targeted. There's already some, but I think there will be more targeted support. And the fact that we saw earlier this week, we saw that the government wasn't borrowing quite as much as the Office for Budget Responsibility said it was going to borrow. Of course, a lot of Tory backbenchers weigh in tax cuts, tax cuts, tax cuts. It may be that if there is any fiscal headroom, it goes back into supporting the most vulnerable households with their energy bills. Look, I wish I had better news. The cap is down, but that doesn't mean for a minute that everybody's going to get a lower bill.
No, but but at least it's not. I mean, at least it's not shooting up.
At least it's stabilising. This could go either way, Stephen. So much of what's going to happen to the cost of living crisis this autumn and inflation has nothing at all to do with what the Bank of England does or doesn't do, and interest rate rises that take months, years to feed through. A lot of it, for me, is geopolitics. What's happening with war in Europe? What's happening on global energy markets? What's happening with the OPEC exporters cartel that's very close to Russia now? You saw Saudi Arabia yesterday. It's going to join that group of BRICS, the BRIC economies, Brazil, Russia, India and China, setting up a kind of rival power base to the West. So, look, we just all want to get through the winter, right? We want to pay our energy bills. We want to keep the wolf from the door. I wish it was more simple. I wish I could say, hooray, bills are coming down. A lot of headlines will say that, but they won't tell you the whole story.
OK. Liam, I know you always will. Good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
So what's up with Jennifer Aniston? We're going to find out in just a couple of moments.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It's 9:19. Good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Yes, it is. And I was saying that we want to find out the latest about Jennifer Aniston and other things. Here's Stephanie Tetchy to tell us.
Good morning, Stephen and Anne.
Can we start with Jennifer Aniston, because I've been chomping at the bit to
Yes.
talking about marriage.
Talking about marriage, which we have been talking about on the show today, where the parents should just stay together for the kids. Well, Jennifer is actually the product of divorced parents, and she says it's actually affected her marriages. So she's had 2 divorces. Says she got divorced from Brad Pitt and then also divorced from Justin Theroux, who was her recent husband. And she said, you know, from watching her parents' marriage break down and the divorce they went through, it's kind of put her off relationships. She says that she now prefers to be single. She's 54 years old. And she says, you know, watching her parents' marriage just break down, it just kind of put her off wanting to be as a unit anymore. She says she's become very self-sufficient and very independent.
It's funny because we were saying, why are we all so fond of Jennifer Aniston? And it's we look at her and we think she's so beautiful.
Yes.
And she seems to be so friendly. She ought to find love.
I
know, we
know,
want
and
her to be in love.
I think people wanted the fairy tale for Jennifer, especially when she got with Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
They were like that Hollywood golden couple.
Oh, well,
and then he goes and leaves her for Angelina.
And then that's the thing, he cheated on her. Really,
Yeah,
didn't
he did.
And that, I mean, that's very
And then
hard
there's
to
always
go
been
over.
that, you know, is it because she wanted children? Is it because she couldn't have children?
And she's been open about that as well. And she said, you know, she couldn't have children. She said they tried many times, but she couldn't get pregnant. So there's always a story behind it. And I think it's pretty brave of her, because I think people always feel sorry for her in the sense where she's had 2 failed marriages. And you would think someone as stunning as her would be able to have a relationship.
It's a bit Princess Diana-like, isn't it?
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, what a segue.
Oh, that's a good
but
segue.
But it is, isn't it? You look at her and you think she has to be one of the most beautiful women in the world.
Charismatic.
Why can't she find a man to adore her?
I know.
And we all thought that of Diana too.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
I love Diana. She's like one of my icons.
But they're looking at the death of Diana in the
Yeah,
Crown.
so this is actually going to be next week's going to be 26 years since Diana passed.
Oh, I can't believe that.
And the final series of The Crown will be portraying her death. It's been a bone of controversy for a lot of people, because it's one of those things, should art really imitate life and should it be shown in the final series? This week has been the Edinburgh Book festival, and a lot of the producers have been speaking there, and they've said that they're actually going to cover the death in the series, but they're going to do it sensitively and very respectfully to the family as well. So it's going to make for tough viewing.
But there's no such thing as doing it respectfully for the family, is there, in that sense?
No.
Because the family don't... We know William, particularly, really doesn't
want that story. But the thing is, everybody does know this story, and it's been spoken out for many years, and you've got a lot of people who watched The Crown, so this is the final series, so in a way you do have to portray it. They're not going to portray the car accident, but it's just going to, in the lead up to it and after it. So I think that's been their happy compromise. You don't seem to be buying it, Stephen.
No, I'd leave it.
But how can you do the final series of The Crown without doing it?
Yeah.
Because we all know what happens.
Yeah.
So why not?
It depends how they show it, doesn't it?
It does.
But we know they are filming something around the Paul Darmar tunnel.
Yes, they have been.
Because we've actually seen shots of them, all the film crews going into the tunnel and everything.
So I think they're kind of damned if they do and damned if they don't.
Yeah.
But also, they will also be portraying Kate Middleton. Well, now she's Princess of Wales, but Kate, before she got with William as well.
Dress.
In the dress. I think we've got a little screenshot of it.
This is when they were at university.
Yeah.
She took part in a university fashion
and it was
show.
quite a risky dress. I don't think we've ever seen her dress
Prince
like
William
that.
took one look at her in that dress.
So
and
that's my wife.
Yeah. I don't think
we don't seem to be showing it.
Can you not show the picture?
I don't know.
Find it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Find it. Is that what? I didn't know she'd done that.
Yeah, she did. She'd done a catwalk show when she was at St Andrews University, and she was wearing
knew what
the
she was
dress.
doing,
Princess Diana had the revenge dress, but Kate, she had the risque dress.
Yes.
But we've never seen her dress like that again.
It was the marry me dress.
The marry me dress. Yes, don't you be going down that route, Stephanie.
Trust me, I've got a few of those.
Have we seen them?
I've seen one or two on Instagram.
You have.
Is that one we're talking about?
Yes, you know
that
the famous black dress.
Oh, show us.
Stephanie, as always,
Thank
good to
you.
see you. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yes, I'll be back in the morning.
Look forward to it. Thank you very much indeed. That is it from us.
It is.
For today. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 6.
Yeah, we'll be back.
But up next, it's Britain's Newsroom with Tom and Ellie. Morning, you two.
Morning.
Morning to you both. Yes, that's right. At 9:30, Britain's Newsroom with me and Tom. And it is a packed show today. What have we got coming up, Tom?
Well, of course, we're going to be discussing the Trump mugshot. Is it a photo of defiance or is it a look of a criminal? There's so much to get stuck into there. But also news on the energy price cap, of course. But does it mean we'll actually save money or be spending more?
Yeah, we're also going to be debating whether we should continue to send foreign aid to India. We're going to be having a really good debate about that. Patrick Christie's getting a lot of hate on social media for suggesting we should stop. Do let us know what you think. gbnews@gbnews.com. Let's get the weather for you.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Good morning. A case of dodging the downpours today and tomorrow. The long weekends will stay on the cool side, but it should get a little drier as the weekend goes on. Many of us starting a little chilly out there this morning, but with some decent spells of sunshine. Clouds going to bubble up pretty rapidly through the morning, and then we'll see a scattering of showers developing. I suspect parts of eastern England will stay dry, and the showers fairly well scattered elsewhere, so some sunshine coming through. The main exception to that will be northern Scotland, where it stays wet and fairly windy as well. Always on the cool side, a fresher feel compared to yesterday across East Anglia and the southeast. Temperatures high teens at best for many. Still a few